Our story begins when a tree starts glowing bright blue, and a voice comes out of it coughing and saying that he was choking to death like that. He is completely confused as he wakes up without knowing where he is, although he clearly realizes that this place is not his home. He wonders why he woke up in the middle of the woods. What's more, he cries out in shock when his hair becomes as thick as tree vines, just thinking that it must all be a strange dream or something. He thinks that maybe he was too busy and something probably happened while he didn't realize it, but instead of worrying too much, he decides that he could just keep sleeping because after all he could probably wake up from that dream. Even though he wanted to, it was still absurd to realize that he had actually turned into a tree and that this was just some ridiculous joke because it was far from real. He could only remember drinking water, and now he could imagine that he had probably choked to death on it. It also made him realize that he had been reincarnated, but it was still super weird to have been reincarnated as a tree. To find out exactly how and why it became a tree, you need to be subscribed to this channel to keep up with all the Manuka summary video releases. That said, let's move on. The protagonist thinks that usually, when people are reincarnated in another world, they are reborn as some good-looking guy with a predefined harem, but at this moment he didn't even have his 4 limbs. Without hands, he couldn't even lift weights. He wondered what he had done wrong, and it seemed that there was no way to change things now that he had become a tree, but then he realized that there was something wrong. After all, trees aren't supposed to have eyes, but he could still see his surroundings. He realized that the height of that canyon must have been over 100 meters, and now he could feel himself practically trapped between 2 mountains. He wondered if trees could even have sight, and never thought he could smell, or rather feel, the things around him like that. He had about 50 branches and could move another one, but it seemed that because he had stood still for too long, his legs had gone very numb, and now he couldn't control the other parts of his body as well as he could. Even so, he has become able to use his 5 senses better. He has heard a few howls from monsters so far and thinks that if they wanted to hurt him, he couldn't do anything to stop it. If even a ridiculous woodpecker is watching him and tries to do any damage to his body, he could certainly die easily. But he is surprised when he looks up at the sky and notices a plane passing by, which means that he should still be in the same century as he was born in his previous life. At the same time, 2 bees start circling the tree and irritate him because they are noisy and annoying, so he quickly launches an attack with his whip, killing them with a double kill. But not only does this surprise him, but when a sort of system window congratulates him on having killed 2 bees, he gets 0.2 evolution points. He was Yuziyu, having the body of a mutated willow tree with a lifespan of no more than 20 years and who had just gained his first evolution points. He had the abilities of mutant branches as well as passive abilities to gain sunlight every day to accumulate evolution points, and could also kill other creatures to gain evolution points based on the power of the creature he was targeting. Yuziyu is surprised that the name his tree was given was also the same as when he was still human, and the window asks if he would like to use his evolution points now. He considers how he got 0.1 points from killing a bee, and getting sunlight every day would only earn him the same score per day. It seemed that he could only improve his current branches, but in any case, getting stronger wasn't bad, and he wanted to see how he could handle things that way. Yuziyu was worried because there were threats on all sides within the forest, and he needed to use everything in his power to get stronger. He was surprised to see that his branches were really like his arms, which made him feel very relieved because now he didn't have to worry about anything else. There was a hive of bees nearby that made a lot of noise, and he wanted to get rid of them quickly, so he decided to make them his new evolution points. Yuziyu attacks the bees with a laugh, quite happy to cause such a slaughter of the insect, and so half a month passes. Since then, all of Yuziyu's branches had been strengthened, and he was now becoming much stronger, still having 0.3 evolution points left over since then. Yuziyu managed to unite all his branches at the same time so that he could attack a large stone as a very powerful super attack. Or that's what should have happened, but his branches still weren't able to touch the stone directly, but it was still enough to cause a bit of destruction. Using air movement from this to cause damage really didn't seem too bad a tactic, and he could let his enemies underestimate him from a distance and then kill them with one swift movement. It had been half a month since he had awakened, but now he was much bigger and was able to evolve a lot. A normal tree wouldn't have grown as quickly as he did, and what's more, he was now able to feel his roots absorbing energy. Yuziyu had been afraid that he wouldn't be able to do anything, but he knew that he could get even stronger from now on, especially because he was able to absorb more quickly than other creatures, and he had something that other people don't have, and that was its lifespan, because it couldn't get sick or tired, and being 20 years old at the moment, with the evolution points, it could keep growing, and one day it could become something as impressive as the world tree. Yuziyu no longer needed to worry about working, studying, eating, or thinking about anything now that he had been reincarnated as a tree, and he certainly didn't need to worry about anything. He could start on his unique path to becoming God, which was incredible. Suddenly, Suddenly, he heard some bird calls and thought about how a few days ago, when he broke off a branch that was blocking the sunlight, a new bird's nest had appeared in his own tree. It seemed to be a medium-sized peregrine falcon and a ferocious beast. The size of an adult peregrine falcon was around 41 to 50 centimeters, with a wingspan of around 1 meter. It was a bird that could fly from 271 to 360 kilometers per hour, which was impressive considering that a leopard could only have a speed of 120 kilometers per hour. It was so fast that if used to hunt its prey, it would leave its prey choking from being so nervous about running away from something like that. Yuziyu could feel that this world was now filled with mutant air and was totally different from the world of his previous life. There was still the use of his air battle ability, and he thought that if he just tamed them and made the animals help him, he could secure even more power in this world. Since the problems had reached that point, he couldn't change anything, and that was the difficulty of arriving in his second life. But this time, no matter how dangerous that world might be, he would do his best to survive. In this world, there were storm wolves, huge ants, spider queens, and all kinds of other huge creatures and monsters. Meanwhile, Yuziyu managed to catch a rabbit without killing any other creature, and earned points for this effort too, and decides to use this meat to feed the baby hawk bird, and he himself is amazed at the disgusting way the chicks start to eat the rabbit meat. Still, he manages to get points from the sunlight and is relieved that he has finally achieved a full point. And so, finally all 50 of his branches were strengthened, and now the next thing Yuziyu needed to do was strengthen the roots as well as the trunk. The protagonist is surprised because he didn't think he would need 1 point to strengthen a root, which was almost 10 times what he used to strengthen his branches, meaning that the roots were much more important. Yuziyu got excited and started to strengthen his root using his available point, but to his surprise he felt great pain and was confused by what was happening. He was frightened because the evolution hurt so much that it felt like a drill that wouldn't stop, but to his surprise, his root grew to the point where it was as huge as a black python that could move freely and without any great hindrance from him, making him overjoyed because that was the true power of the evolution points. It seemed that the branches and roots could move freely, but he was curious about its trunk too, and tried to start moving it as well. But instead of moving, he felt a gigantic pain that was even worse than the previous one, and he decided to put that aside in favor of running because in reality Yuziyu couldn't even move a little. It seemed that he would need to strengthen his 8 roots in order to protect the trunk, which was like his heart, and so he should protect it at all costs. Yuziyu realized that he had a great force of destruction, and so he should start by hiding it first before anything else. But anyway, all the evolution points had been used successfully, and now he needed to be able to use more of it. Suddenly, he notices a movement in the undergrowth and prepares himself for battle mode, wondering who was approaching. What he found under the bushes was a fox lying on the ground with a large wound on its body, which shocked the protagonist, but luckily it still seemed to be alive, although the wound was black and appeared to be from some kind of poisoning. He thinks it should be possible to turn evolution points into food, but he couldn't allow the hawks to stop and eat her. The system window warns that the liquid from the branch could be used to detoxify and stop the bleeding from the energy and could cause pleasant effects. Yuziyu is surprised by this, and the system keeps notifying him that after use, the branch will lose its strengthening point effect and return to its normal level. He decided that he could just take the poison from the fox and kill it to get his points, then use it as food, thus getting points and strengthening the root as he wished. The protagonist heals the fox as expected, and the system recognizes the wound being healed, stops bleeding, recovers, and thus restores its energy. Yuziyu feels incredible to the point of looking like a doctor, but this has reduced his branches from 50 to 49. Now that the poison has been cleansed, it was the ideal moment to turn his evolution point, but before the protagonist could use the fox to his advantage, it approached him and was all lovey-dovey with him, looking very grateful. Yuziyu gets annoyed and tells her not to keep rubbing up against him like that, and also not to think that she could get rid of it just because she caressed him. After all, she was just a mere evolution point, but she was too cute to kill, so Yuziyu couldn't bear the thought, and decided that he could think about it later, and would first worry about petting the fox. She had eyes like crystals and saw fur, but suddenly she began to glow to the point where he was shocked and confused. The system explains that now that the fox had received the liquid from the branch, it had begun to evolve, and now it had achieved its new mutation and was at age 3 of 30, having the beginner level, being stage 4, and had a special ability called Charming Eyes. Yuziyu is impressed because the fox has grown much more than before and its fur now looks like fire. The protagonist then opens the status window and realizes that he now also has a beginner level in his file and the stage marked as 9, and just as expected he didn't know anything about it until a little while before. It seemed that he was 5 levels stronger than the fox, and it seemed that the essence was not only healing, but also accelerated the evolution of other creatures. And at that stage, after growing up, he could see his own power emerging. But even more importantly, he should should be able to see the difference between himself and his enemies, perhaps after he was able to reach the first rank, or maybe the second rank, super rank, or even the final rank, the kind that could reach the immortal level. Yuziyu could feel as if his life, or rather his life as a tree, had just started on the road to becoming a god in that world. He wonders if he could be counted as a human tree or something, and this makes him wonder why the fox has been on the run all this time in the forest. He thinks it must have been being hunted by other humans because its fur must have been worth a lot of money and the hole in its body looked like an arrow wound. These days, Yuziyu hadn't been prepared to interact with humans, which was a problem, especially since the last thing he was interested in was meeting bad humans. He could end up being treated like a demon tree and killed, so he decided that he could only act once he had become strong enough, so for now he should just act like an ordinary tree as discreetly as possible. Suddenly, the fox takes off running and Yuziyu is worried about who is approaching, soon realizing that it is two humans. He wonders why humans have appeared just now, and suddenly the two girls say they've come to see their father, which leaves the protagonist totally confused. The women leave an offering under the tree and pray, and Yuziyu is surprised because he never imagined that their father was buried under their feet, probably being part of their roots now, but he still couldn't stop thinking that there was something very strange about the whole situation. Finally, one of them stopped praying and said she wanted to eat the apple straight away, and the other asked why her sister was in such a hurry, and she complained that her father would let her eat as much as she wanted without saying anything in return. Yuziyu was hoping that they would leave at once because she wanted to eat those offerings, and one sister pulled the other away saying that they needed to go back and take a bath, so the two left to go to a nearby lake so that they could bathe. The two girls played around in the bath, and one of them even mentioned the other's name, which was Xiao Ling. Meanwhile, Yuziyu was very frustrated because there was a tree blocking his view of the girls' bath, and he realized that he could try to change his position so that he could see better. He uses all his strength to get up and see further, becoming frustrated at his own weakness. Eventually, Ling and her sister leave and the protagonist sighs with relief, hoping that they will never come near there again. Suddenly, one of them stops and says that they will come back to see their father again, and so a week has passed since that day. The calm place that was the canyon was full of hidden dangers. In it there was the stage 3 beginner peregrine falcon. There was also the mutated golden eagle with a life force talent where its scream could burst the eardrums of its prey. It had sharp talons to catch its prey, and its golden feathers were as strong as metal. Interfering with the bird, the stage 4 beginner mutated red fox began a battle against it, eventually being cruelly killed. But suddenly, Yuziyu attacked the bird with his own branches and successfully killed the golden eagle, thus gaining 70 evolution points. During those 2 weeks after feeding the essence of life, the growth of the peregrine falcons was much faster. Yuziyu praised the falcons for their performance and for having grown so much over time. The red fox had also always stayed by his side since saving his life a few days ago. That golden eagle had been taunting Yuziyu all week, wanting to attack her, but had finally been able to kill her himself now. He realized that his aura needed to be hidden, and that eagle had probably been drawn towards him precisely because of that. Just one level 7 golden eagle was problematic enough that if an animal of the same level as that one appeared, it would certainly end up dead. That's why Yuziyu needed to find ways to get even stronger, and he knew that in the canyon he might end up encountering a creature that could kill him, so he had to be very careful from then on. But not only he, but also the animals that lived with him needed to be strong, but he only had 70 evolution points now, which he could use to get even stronger. Lately, the peregrine falcons had reached level 3 and the red fox had reached level 4, which made him wonder what they would look like when they reached the next stage to be able to evolve. But before that, Yuziyu thanked them for their hard work and rewarded them with life essence, a body fluid that accelerated the evolution of living creatures. But quite suddenly an attack was heading their way, and the protagonist even tried to protect himself, but ended up receiving a warning that the root of his tree had been destroyed, and its branches had also suffered significant damage. What approached was a huge snake, leaving Yuziyu shocked because 26 of its branches had been destroyed and only 24 remained, but at least he could use them. He couldn't even sense that a new enemy had appeared, so immersed was he in victory. But the truth was that this huge snake had the ideal ability to hide its aura, and it was a big problem for those who weren't alert. Yuziyu tells the system to display the snake's attributes panel, and so he discovers that this was a beginner level 9 war axe snake. It had the talent of being able to hide its aura completely, and its special talents were its blade and strong fangs that could pierce steel plates, but it also had a tail that was like an axe that could be used to cut anything, such as enemy plants. That snake was quite a problem, and Yuziyu told the animals to hide behind him because he would take care of that threat before they could be targeted. Yuziyu strengthened his roots using evolution points so that he could defend himself against the snake's attacks, but he quickly realized that this was a very strong monster, but it still couldn't be underestimated because it was also at level 9. If it was handled hand-to-hand combat, he wouldn't need to be afraid of the snake, so he continued strengthening his body with his evolution points and decided to strengthen all his roots at the same time. Yuziu focuses on hitting the belly, which would be his ideal chance to attack, and hits it straight on, sending that snake out of his territory, but to his surprise his attack, even though it hit, didn't cause any punctures and the damage was nothing more than a small crack. Yuziu realized that everything had gone wrong and that his opponent could now easily cut him down, but he himself couldn't do any significant damage. Even so, he knew that he couldn't show fear so easily and that he had to release a strong killing intent in order to threaten his opponent and send him away, but suddenly the snake gets up and starts to move away. Yuziu sighs in relief as he realizes that he has managed to survive. He almost thought he was going to die that day. The fox and the birds approached to see if he was alive and well, and Yuziu assured them that he was and that they didn't need to worry so much. Despite this, he let that snake escape and knew that it could still be a threat again in the future and he would need to be very careful, and the reason this happened was all because he was too weak. It was very difficult to get strong in such a short space of time, and he knew that the snake would get even stronger when it took his energy, and he could only wait there if he wanted to die. But if he could strengthen his 8 roots, his strength and core could shatter, which was a big problem too. He had 10 evolution points to use to get to the next level, and the window asked if he would like to evolve as well. Just as Yuziu thought, after the beginner stage, he would reach rank 1, and so on. That was all very strong, but he needed to get even stronger than that now, because he didn't want to find himself in such a dangerous situation again. Yuziu accepted evolution, wanting to never stop evolving so that he could get stronger and live in a world where the weak die. He needed to start by becoming a big tree, so he couldn't stop evolving, and so he finally evolved into a mutant willow tree with the longevity of 200 years at rank 1 level. All the cut branches grew back and his body grew a lot too, and there were still 51 evolution points left to use. But not only Yuziu was affected by the light of evolution, but also the stage 7 beginner mutant red fox, as well as the hawks who had become peregrines and were now stage 5 beginners. The protagonist is happy because apparently his change could affect the animals around him too, so he tells the hawks to go out and find out where that snake has gone, and so they all go out, leaving Yuziu surprised because they have become so fast that they look like a bullet. He realized that he might easily be able to pierce through those sturdy creatures now that they had evolved, but apart from them, the fox seemed much more powerful now too. Yuziu could feel the body's energy spreading, so he decided to open the status window, and it seems that since he had reached rank 1, his attributes and talents should have increased too. Suddenly, those 2 girls from before appeared running and begging for help when several monsters started running after them, and they kept running and wondering why they were all chasing them like that. Yuziu realized that the light of evolution must have drawn the monsters closer, and it seemed that for them, Yuziu was some kind of spiritual pill, and it must have been the same for the other monsters that had approached before. But that didn't mean that they could all always try to eat it whenever they wanted, and just when the girls who were running away were going to be attacked by the monsters, the fox intervened to save them, making them scream even more in fear. The fox began to hunt down all the monsters, as well as the hawk, leaving the girls surprised that they had all come to save them and even made it seem like an animal war. Yuziu says that now that the animals can't get any closer, he tells the fox and the hawks to back off because it would let all those cheeky monsters know what they were dealing with. After all, Yuziu himself was also a monster, and that's why he was going to kill them all. Yuziu tells them all to attack him at once, so they all go after him, and the protagonist quickly begins to react to the attack, wanting to turn them all into his new evolution points. Yuziu begins by killing each of them, earning 50 points for a mutant hippopotamus, 10 points for a mutant rat, 30 points for a mutant rhinoceros, 20 points for a mutant giraffe, and 20 points for a mutant wild boar. He also kills a mutant bat even though it was agile enough to dodge his initial attack, laughing because they could even try to block his attacks, but it seemed that he didn't need to kill every one of those mutant monsters. Yuziu killed all the mutant monsters he wanted and took their bodies, but there was still a need to know what he would do with the 2 girls who had fainted during all the intense combat. After all, if he let them know about his secret, things would get problematic, and killing them would turn him into a demon tree. If a villager finds out that 2 people have disappeared, it will only attract even more people than before, and they could even send an army to search for the disappearances and deaths, which would only bring more problems. There was a good chance that he would still be bought by the zoo as an ugly tree for display, but he quickly thought of one last course of action he could take to deal with the problematic situation quickly. The 2 girls suddenly wake up and are shocked when one of the tree's branches goes towards them, but Yuziu begins to communicate by writing on the ground, relieved that at least he was able to learn to write in his previous life. The girls stare at the ground, and the protagonist nervously hopes that they will believe him and that their father has actually become a willow tree. After all, he saved them when they were in danger and hopes that they will believe him. If it didn't work, there was only one other other way. Then, one of the girls asks what his name was and his biggest secret so that she could confirm that it was really her father. So Yuziu asks for the system's help, which states that the girl was He Xiao Ling, aged 14, who liked Er Nui from the neighboring village, and the other was He Xiao Qing, aged 14, who dropped out of school to work and look after her grandfather and sister. The protagonist writes this information down, and Ling is embarrassed when he openly exposes his secret, making Qing laugh at her sister for liking a guy from the other village. Ling replies that only her father could know this information, and the protagonist remembers that during his free time he made a pair of clips just to pass the time, and gave them to the two girls. People always had special feelings for those who were gone, and they should also feel fear and longing at the same time. Considering that their father was buried under his roots, it was just a fact. Their father told Qing to take care of his grandfather and sister before he died, and it seemed that perhaps unintentionally, over time, this knowledge was passed on to Yuziu, and now he could talk to them as if he were their father. Yuziu says that he has passed on the job of looking after his sister, leaving school and working to her, thanking her and apologizing for passing on such an important task to her. Qing cries, and Yuziu realizes that with the passage of time, it seemed as if the whole thing had somehow merged with him, as if the soul of the girl's father had come into contact with him. The sisters talk about how unexpected the last 2 months have been, because the previous month a plane was attacked by a group of crows, and since it crashed, nothing has been left behind. What's more, the sea had a dark stain that devoured an entire boat. Some people say that the air had an unknown structure, and it was this structure that was causing the living things of the world to start evolving, and Yuziu knew that this was known as spiritual energy in the east and magic in the west. The protagonist never imagined that so many things like this would be happening in the outside world, and Qing agreed because she thought it was just fake news, but now that she was able to see her father as a tree, she could believe it. Meanwhile, Ling approached some of the animals that were trapped so that she could observe them more closely, and they even tried to threaten her life, but the fox quickly approached to threaten them back and leave the tame animals without threatening Ling. She is surprised that they were obeying her like that and says that as expected, the fox, called Hong, was really incredible and respectable. Yuziu is surprised that Ling was treating Hong as if she were somehow familiar, and says that those 4 wolves she had been watching had only just been captured, and yet Ling was having the nerve to dare to play with them, but as Hong was just watching, it didn't look like anything was going to happen. That's because not only those wolves, but also the other mutant monsters that were trapped by their branches, if they weren't being held down properly, would certainly give them a lot of trouble. Even so, the cow he had captured was quite calm, and as he couldn't beat it now, he just kept it lying quietly, and somewhat bravely Qing decided to sleep on it too. Although she was quiet, there were still others who were very annoying and noisy and kept trying to escape, but Yuziu didn't want to deal with these animals now and decided to leave them alone for the time being. For now, he opened the status window and realized that he was full of new talents and skills that could be improved, and it was the perfect time to start strengthening himself again. He had a total of 149 evolution points, which was enough to increase his power, and it seemed that he could use a new skill also called Dense Fog Barrier, which spread a dense fog to hide himself. In addition, he could use the hallucinogen, which strengthened the effect of illusions to smoke and twigs to confuse creatures. These 2 new skills seemed great to Yuziu and were all very important for helping him improve, so he spent 20 of his points to activate them. Hallucinogenic wasn't a very rare type of ability, as many plants have structures and that sort of thing, but if you were the person Yuziu was a year ago, you wouldn't think it would be possible to combine the 2 abilities. Although he was rank 1 now, he could still increase his rank in the future, and even if the snake tried to meet him again in the future, things wouldn't be so nice and easy, especially if it attracted more enemies because of this. Yuziu definitely needed to kill this snake, but not now, because he needed to make sure that there were no more strong enemies around him before anything else. When the time came, it would be a real duel between Yuziu and the war snake. Suddenly, he realizes that Ling was worried because the Hong fox had disappeared, but the protagonist replies that she was right next to him, just testing the hallucinogenic effect and thus confirming that it was working. Yuziu says it's getting late and tells Hong to take the girls back to the village, and tells them not to tell anyone about him because if other people find out, they'll try to capture him for experiments, and they shouldn't even tell their grandfather. On the way back, Ling says that everything that happened that day was unbelievable, and before, they were being chased by beasts, and now they were walking on a big fox, and Qing agrees because walking through the forest was really good, and the 2 thank Hong for his help. Yuziu decided it was time to start the second round of evolutions and strengthen 50 branches with his 50 evolution points, as well as strengthening 9 of his roots with 45 evolution points. He improved the dense fog barrier with 10 evolution points, as well as improving the hallucinogen with 45 evolution points. That night, the beasts that were 10 kilometers away from Yuziu were unable to rest, because the bestial instinct within them was sensing the rise of a new being. And so, finally, everything in Yuzu was able to be strengthened. The protagonist is surprised because increasing the effect of his hallucinogen meant that the creatures around him also ended up seeing various frightening illusions, but they were all too noisy. He had upgraded his 2 skills to the 2nd level and only had 14 evolution points left to use, and although the talent still couldn't be upgraded, he still needed 50 evolution points. As his roots had already evolved to the point where they were 100 meters deep, he was now able to feel a lot of spiritual energy flowing through them. 100 meters was a lot, and there were many things down there that he didn't know about, and there might even be a spiritual river from that great distance. Yuzu realized that he should put those things underground and just in time for his hawks to return. The protagonist realized that he had to be very careful not to run the risk of finding traces of the earth snake because it seemed that the damage they had caused had not been minor. Yuzu tells the hawks to keep looking for the snake because it has devoured half of its branches and surely it should show up, as they couldn't hold out for another duel. When the wolves continue to make noise, Yuzu hits them with his whip to tell them to shut up. Just then, Ling and Qing appear and realize that their father has been annoying the wolves again, leaving the protagonist surprised that they have returned so early. They ask how Yuzu could fight with these wolves when they were so cute, and Yuzu tells them to be careful when they approach their cages. Qing enters the wolf's cage and apologizes to the wolves because it should be hurting now, but soon it will stop hurting, and so she begins to take care of them. Yuzu is impressed that the wolves have calmed down even with the girls around, and they begin to look after the other animals, feeding them as well to keep them calm instead of agitated and nervous. The protagonist comments that he never expected Ling and Qing to be so good at looking after these creatures, and it seemed that humans were the only ones who could tame the animals, and that should be a good thing. Ever since Yuzu arrived in that world, he had been on constant alert for threats, but now seemed like a good time to relax. That morning, the Ling and Qing sisters also intended to go out to the mountain again, which made their grandfather very worried. They commented that after the death of the girl's father, it had been a long time since they had been able to see the two of them laughing like that, and it didn't seem bad at all to let them do what made them happy, but their grandfather was still curious as to why the two of them always went to the mountain. Yuzu realized that the fox had picked up the girls again that day too, and it had been half a month since they had been together, and it seemed that the sisters and Hong had been getting on well. The sisters were happy to meet Hong again, and because she had shown up to accompany them to the Yuzu tree. On the way, Qing asked why her sister was laughing, and Ling replied that it was because she had brought fertilizer for her father from one of her grandfathers to make her father even stronger, all because she had woken up early in the morning to collect it for him. She also knew that her father liked sweets, but soon the two sisters realized that it was getting dark and they would have to run to get to Yuzu. On the way, they meet a big monster and they have to run to save themselves, and in parallel Yuzu was taking care of killing new monsters, luring them to where he was to make them become his new evolution point. After killing the bees, the protagonist laughs as he sees the evolution points growing in his database again and thanks his hawks for their help, giving them some of his essence as a reward for their efforts. As expected, nurturing them was indeed the right choice because they were now at beginner stage 7, much stronger than before. Now he could use 100 evolution points to upgrade his mutant roots, and Yuzu was frustrated because it was twice as expensive to upgrade to the 2nd level now. For the time being, he decides to upgrade a first one to increase his strength, leaving all the beasts impressed and almost frightened by how much more powerful his root has become with an increase in power. Yuzu, despite this, felt such absurd pain that he could almost have lost consciousness, and once strengthened, it seemed that with that root it might be possible for him to use it to easily deal with rank 1 beasts now. Now he could also test the power of level 2, leaving Yuzu impressed because his root reached a much greater distance than before, and it was almost like a scene from hell on earth catching so many animals at once, but with this he was able to gain so many animals at once that it was incredible. What's more, he got another 210 evolution points, making Yuzu happy because it was so good to get so many points at once that it felt like he was rich. He was determined to be able to duel the snake again and take revenge, and so he also discovered that his mutant roots could turn enemies into their own nutrients. Yuzu decides to keep them protecting the underground, and when something approaches, he would know quickly with new notifications. The protagonist sees the trapped animals grumbling and tells them to shut up because Ling will bring them food later, and when he thinks about it, he realizes that Hong left a long time ago and now it was almost dark, but there was still no sign of them coming. Yuzu told the hawk to search with the others for Hong and the girls because he was getting worried about them being late and shouldn't let them out of his sight. It doesn't take long for Yuzu to realize that Hong was bloodied and bruised and that he needed to use a lot of life essence to restore the fox's vitality before she could die. The protagonist asked what happened and why only Hong came back and where the girls were, and it doesn't take long for Yuziyu to realize that a monster has caught them both, and Yuziyu almost sees Ching being eaten by the snake before he ends up running with his root to save her from death. He is amazed that the war snake has devoured 3 of his branches and has not only changed its appearance, but has also become much stronger than before. The snake also wanted to become more powerful so that it could kill the tree that had defeated it, but Yuziyu never expected it to become so powerful. The war snake realized that it was still no match for Yuziyu and retreated again and hid. Meanwhile, Yuziyu began to use his life essence on Ching in order to save her life, and the system reported that despite the use, her vitality showed no sign of improving. Yuziyu uses 10 evolution points and adds even more life essence to Ching, begging her to wake up, just as all the animals around her beg her to wake up and not die. Yuziyu continued to use life essence despite the system saying that no signs of improvement were detected in her, but he continued to use everything he had without stopping until he had no more evolution points. At the same time, Ling was in the village being looked after by a doctor who said that their medicinal level was too low and they needed to remove the poison somehow, but the poison had already reached her heart and brain, and even if she survived, she would be disabled. Suddenly, more people come running to ask if they have found Ching too, but no one has been able to find her yet, and they comment that there was a possibility that she had been eaten by beasts inside the mountain. The protagonist discovers from his hawk that Ling was also in a bad way and realizes that he had always known this, but now he fully understood that plants also had emotions. Because of life, shocks have happened and people have been saddened, but Yuziyu never imagined that one day he would feel such fury as he was feeling now. Yuziyu prepared the animals, now his servants, so that they could begin the great battle, and also a hunt that was about to begin on the mountain. On Lake Peng, near the archipelago, there were 16 accidents within half a year, with more than 20 ships suffering in just a fortnight. They later discovered that a group of mutant crows and mutant sea beasts were to blame. The group of crows devoured the planes, and the sea beasts devoured the ships, and the more the beasts improved, the more they wanted to continue to dominate. The loud sound emitted by the vehicles was insane, and the area practically became a dead zone, and so the spiritual energy finally began. The people began to prepare, knowing that they had discovered that there were even more invasions by mutant beasts and even more casualties were happening, as well as having detected levels of spiritual energy that were over 5,000 and kept increasing more and more. Creatures that exceeded 1,000 points of spiritual energy were threats to the army, and those that exceeded 5,000 were no longer affected by normal weapons. But to humanity's surprise, there were 8 places with monsters with more than 5,000 points mark, creating a big red alert of danger, to the point where they found a spiritual energy greater than 18,000 points. It seemed like nothing more than an announcement of the end of the world. The size of the creature decided its combatability. Currently, when the war snake faced such an opponent, it was like a king dominating everything around it. The war was still going on between Yuziyu's army and the great war snake, and they were all blinded with hatred at what the snake had done to Ling and Ching. Even Hong, who was now an early stage 8 fire fox, was the 4th time they had met and was ready for another fight. The first time was just as prey and predator, the second was when the snake fought Yuziyu, and the third was protecting the Ling and Ching sisters. That day, she was only a beginner stage 7 fox, so the difference in power was much greater, and she also ended up being only the hunted. At that moment, Hong broke down, thinking that if she had been stronger, then she could have changed things. This thought contaminated his entire brain, and so this time, even though he was going to die, Hong decided to destroy that snake whatever the cost. Even the war snake felt this instinct of hatred. The war snake understood that the fox would be a major threat in the future and that it had to be exterminated now. Hatreds, this time, needed to be resolved once and for all so that they could put an end to everything. It was a large creature that used its claws and head to hunt its prey, and now they were fighting with everything they had. This creature wanted to have the perfect body so that it could be at the top of the food chain. It had very strong scales, its teeth could break through many things, and its head was like an axe that could cut through anything. It could destroy everything, and on top of that, it had a paralyzing poison, which was why Hong was currently unable to beat the war snake. Even so, the great battle raged on between them, bloody enough that it didn't take long for the hawks to join the fray too. Not only did the war snake feel the great pressure brought by the hawk, but so did the fox. It wasn't a strong shock, but it was like a vital burn, telling them that they were going to kill their enemies at all costs. When things are rubbed together, heat is produced. The shock between the air and the body produces friction. If the speed of a human increases too much, then the body produces heat and then burns and dies. Ballistic diving was a method that could hurt both the enemy and oneself. It was a high speed that caused great damage to the enemy, but that same high speed produced heat, which was sometimes so strong that the body itself could not withstand such pressure. It was quite an attack to behold, and the power of the 8 peregrine falcons could wreak havoc. When the hawk's mother went out to get food one day, she was eaten, and day and night they could no longer feed themselves, themselves, and were practically on the verge of death. But they were saved by Yuziyu, and so it was as if a light appeared at the end of the tunnel. And because their lives went on, they became able to fly through the sky, because now in their hearts, Yuziyu was like their father. But then one day, a huge sadness struck, and they all still remember well everything they saw, and the best way to do that was to use their best move to achieve victory. Even if they had to sacrifice themselves to do it, it was the necessary thing to do. The hawk swooped down on the war snake alongside the firefox, continuing that powerful and dangerous battle in the mountains. Many were wounded and lost in the process, but the war snake still didn't give in and shot out to attack Hong again, only for its blow to be held back by a firm tree root. And finally Yuziyu intervened during the fight, managing to catch the war snake at just the right moment. The bestial instinct inside the war snake screamed, and it understood that it couldn't face that enemy, quickly wanting to escape for its life. The first time it fought Yuziyu, it consumed its branches to increase to beginner stage 9. Qing and Ling were attacked because they smelled Yuziyu, and the second time they met, the snake again failed to win, and after being wounded, quickly fled. It was wrong about one thing, and that was that it never thought that Yuziyu would work alongside other creatures in order to win. Yuziyu managed, thanks to the support of his companions, to catch the war snake at the right moment so that he could drag it closer and finish it off using its own roots and branches. Yuziyu was furious, waiting to see if the war snake could really get away this time after facing each other so many times, firing a powerful blow that quickly made it spit blood. At that moment, the war snake had only one emotion controlling it, and that emotion was fear. Every nerve in its body was focused on the rage it was feeling towards the tree in front of it, but Yuziyu was ready for it because it was the snake that had provoked it first, and it certainly shouldn't have thought it would survive the end of all that fighting. There was nothing to do but keep fighting. The snake wrapped itself around Yuziyu, and the protagonist realized that this should be his last resort for survival, but it still didn't seem like much to be all he had to offer in a final battle. Yuziyu continued to fire his attacks with pure hatred, ordering him to give Qing his life back for everything he had done, attacking with all his might and everything he had so that he could kill him once and for all. Finally, after a long time, the system alerted him that the protagonist had been able to kill the war snake, obtaining 90 evolution points and thus declaring victory. The golden monkey rose to the first level thanks to this, but Yuziyu was blinded by hatred and continued to beat the war snake's corpse, making it get up over and over again, pulverizing the war snake's body into pure nothingness. But that wasn't enough to end Yuziyu's pain and tears. He knew that he had killed the war snake with all the certainty in the world, and the war snake that had killed Qing and Ling could be none other than him, for in this world the strong feed on the weak. All creatures were just trying to survive, no matter what kind of emotions such as sadness or fury were generated along the way. If you were weak, you couldn't survive, and the life you lost would become part of your power and nourish new life. It was because he knew all this that things should be simple, but Yuziyu was still sad and crying non-stop even after it was all over. He wondered why his tears wouldn't stop falling uncontrollably, not just his own, but those of Hong and all the other survivors, and wondered why he was sad after everything. Hong left Qing's body in the village and allowed people to find her. Yuziyu thanks everyone for their help because it was thanks to them that he was able to avenge Qing and Ling. He offers them what the war snake had risked his life to obtain, and it was entirely theirs to possess. Yuziyu hands them the essence of life, telling them to treat it as a reward for their effort, and then they could leave if they wished. The animals receive the essence of life and all evolve, leaving the protagonist surprised. The cow becomes an early stage 3 mutant savage with a lifespan of 20 years, with talents for using its horns to break through enemies and causing earthquakes using its heavy paws to shake the ground. The wolves become early stage 5 storm mutants with 20 years of longevity, able to control the wind like real storms. Yuziyu is surprised that their appearances have all changed so quickly and finds it quite a scene. Yuziyu says that in the future, the wild cow would become very strong, and he was looking forward to being able to see its development over time, and the 4 storm wolves had awakened the wind attribute too, so he was very excited and proud of their improvements. Yuziyu said that he wished he could accompany them on this journey. He knew that in that era, creatures could control the elements, and this was totally normal, just like humans. His mist counted as a talent, and the dense mist was made from his leaves, and he could also photosynthesize with them. This had the side effect of a hallucinogen, which affected the nerves of living beings. Even so, Yuziyu was surprised that the monsters had even gone up a level, even though some of them hadn't changed much since their previous forms. Suddenly, the animals began to bow their head to Yuziyu, leaving him confused, but it seemed that they all wanted to be by Yuziyu's side from now on. The protagonist then promised that they would all certainly become even stronger than they were now, and also that he would never let any of them die, and would protect them all. In this world, there were many things that Yuziyu still didn't understand or know, but there was still only one path to follow, and that was to fight to get stronger and survive. It was only by surviving that it was possible to experience experience everything in this world, so he was going to do his best to make everyone strong so that anyone who went against him would fear him. Yuzu knew that it would all start with him and things would start to change from then on. On a cold night, where the stars covered the sky, the battle with the war snake didn't even seem to have happened. Yuzu was immersed in the body brought about by rank 1 evolution. The peregrine falcons were doing an area patrol while the storm wolves were doing a land patrol. The heron, the cow, and the monkey were cleaning up the battlefield. The fox was on watch and the bald animal just kept sleeping. Yuzu soon woke up the bald animal and asked it what it thought it was doing sleeping while everyone else continued working. Yuzu threatens the animal to go out and work like everyone else, and if it dares to come back without having cooperated with anything else, he'll find a way of needing it. The animal growls at Yuzu, but then he realizes that it wasn't a threatening sound but a warning one when a strong light appears above them, leaving him confused and curious to know exactly what kind of light it was. Suddenly, Yuzu realized that there was a human form inside that light, thus awakening something or someone inside that light. Our story continues with Yuzu wondering what that strong light was that was shining in the sky, but suddenly it started to approach him, leaving him confused. The light seemed to try to attack him, but physical attacks don't work on him, so it had no effect. Finally, the protagonist saw what looked like Ching from inside the light, and it turned into a small sphere that lodged in his tree, asking him what was going on. Suddenly, the system notified him that he now had the special ability to nourish souls, and the souls seemed to like Yuzu's nectar. That was Xiao Qing's soul, a soul of a talented human mutant who was immune to physical attack. Her special abilities were mental enhancement, one of the few spiritual type abilities that made her exist after death, as well as being able to use telepathy. This made Yuzu wonder how many more times that world could surprise him with such unexpected events, especially when he discovered that the 3-branched life essence could return a soul like that. To find out more, you need to be subscribed to this channel and turn on notifications so you can receive all the Manuka summary videos without fail. Returning to the story, the protagonist remembers a sacred tree called the Tree of Spiritual Nourishment that only its branches could bring back. Even though Yuzu couldn't do as much as it still seemed to be able to return souls, so he decided to wrap Ching's soul around it, thinking that maybe that way he could see her again. Ching asked where he was and who he was, and the protagonist realized that she was nothing more than a ghost left in that world, but Ching herself didn't remember who she was either. Yuzu cared so much about her that he wouldn't let her leave that world, and all because he had become attached to her. The protagonist told him that her name was Xiao Qing and that she was very important to him, promising that this time he would protect her and not lose her again. Whoever was watching the conversation, even without being able to see Qing's soul, was the porcupine, who thought that the words about being important to Yuzu were meant for him. Qing began to get upset because she felt her head was noisy and chaotic. She was able to see many people who were crying, and there was a wave of sadness entering her brain. Yuzu realized that she had indeed lost her memory and wondered what had happened and why her spirit had left her body. So there was probably still a chance that she was alive, but she wondered if the souls had been forged at the time of death, and it could be possible because they were twins, so they shared a soul, but Qing wasn't completely stable. Yuzu didn't know if the life essence would have any effect on her, but decided to use it anyway, making him realize that thanks to the essence Qing looked a little bigger than before. Qing said she could see, but couldn't explain exactly what was happening now. She decided to show the protagonist what she was seeing, and Yuzu was surprised because he had now managed to reach her consciousness, and his body was still in place, but his consciousness had managed to reach hers. What Qing was seeing was the people of the village apologizing because Ling was unconscious and also in a coma. Qing said that it was strange because it seemed that she was able to control Ling's body, and all the people were shocked to see Ling's fingers moving when Qing controlled her. Suddenly, Yuzu comes out of Qing's consciousness and she starts coughing, saying that doing so made her feel very exhausted. Yuzu realizes that Qing was not only able to see through Ling's body, but also for some reason became able to control it, and says that it seemed that if she wanted to, she could awaken and live as Ling in that world. In parallel, two humans were watching the mountains, deciding that their next target this time would be precisely that space. The men watching said that it was raining again, and this seemed like a bad premonition, but it seemed that there was a village nearby, and so they could go there to rest that night. One of them said it was very lucky because his companion, who was an old soldier, had experience in this kind of situation and could guide him this time. The resurrection of spiritual energy energy has always had a few people who have been blessed with this ability, even though this type of energy has always belonged to more than ordinary people. But when a person fully awakens this ability, they obtain an extraordinary title. And that man next to the soldier was an extraordinary one called Yan Gaoyuan, who told them to go ahead so that they could fulfill their objective. In parallel, Qing was showing Yuziyu about her powers, and the protagonist realized that she should be fully awakening her ability, which was impressive because generally speaking, it would take at least 10 days to half a month for this to happen. Yuziyu asks if Qing has heard or seen anything since that day, and she denies it, which makes the protagonist realize that Qing and Ling were both connected in some way. The two were attacked by wild beasts on the mountain and died as a result, and those village people certainly wouldn't leave things as cheap as they were. With Yuziyu's current strength, he should be able to start defending himself against even one shot from a cannonball, but there probably wasn't much reason to worry because it was only a small amount of people from one village, but he still didn't intend to expose himself completely in the process. A war with humans was the last thing Yuziyu wanted to do, but for now he should buy as much time as possible. He starts by using his dense fog so that he can take the canyon as a center and spread out from there. It should be enough to paralyze an entire city. The visibility range was less than -4, but surely they would all break down before they could even reach their goal, as it was too far. A level 2 mist that was dense to such an extent could already cover a relatively large area, which was a little frightening, and one wonders how much more powerful it could become when it reached the 3rd level. Yuziyu hoped that the monsters who served him would get used to it because after birth, life would always continue to evolve all the time, and waiting until they could develop the ability to adapt to dense fog was complicated. The dense fog combined with the hallucinations would almost create a country of fog, which didn't mean it was a dream at all. Soon, those mountains would also be Yuziyu's, covering her completely with their mist. Meanwhile, Qing remarks that it has started raining again, and comments that he can feel an unusual spiritual force nearby. Yuziyu realized that a large number of people were entering the mist right now, and they were all getting closer and closer. Meanwhile, Gaoyuan says that it looked like the car they were using couldn't go any further in this fog, so the old man tells everyone else to leave some people in charge of the cars and the rest of them should make their way towards the village, and to remember to bring those guys with them. The men asked their captain if it was alright to bring them because those guys were far from ordinary people. It was too difficult for tanks and armed vehicles to drive through the mountains like that, and those guys were the last line of defense against those mutant beasts that lived inside the mountains. Inside the guns there were small bullets that had been specially prepared to take down mutant beasts, and in this place there seemed to be strange beasts with around 10,000 points of spiritual power, so they shouldn't wait until they were dead to regret their laziness in making the effort when it was necessary. Suddenly, they feel something wrong and realize that it's nothing more than the fact that they hear people crying coming from the village. Gaoyuan says that he would be going ahead to find out the way and also find out what was going on, and the soldier replies that they would all be after him and he should be careful on his way. Gaoyuan went ahead and everyone else was shocked because he looked like a superhuman, so impressive were his abilities, and meanwhile Yuziyu could sense that although it wasn't very clear, there was still something present within the mist that was a person approaching, and it was unusual, and there was more to it than just one person. The protagonist wonders what was going on and why they were all there, and wonders if they were all after him or something else inside the mountains. Yuziyu asks Qing what's going on and wonders if the villagers have invited anyone to investigate the mountains. Qing replies that she was still trying to control her body, but it was really strange because Ling's remaining soul was emerging inside her. The protagonist is confused and remembers that Qing's body was torn to pieces by that great snake they had faced in the past, and unexpectedly it was merging with Ling's soul. Yuziyu hadn't expected that there would still be anything of his soul left in her body at this point, and it seemed that everything was working to be able to emerge inside Qing. Yuziyu tells Qing to feed more of her essence because he would like her to do something for him, and at the same time Gaoyuan arrives in the village and finds Ling's comatose body, where her father asks if his daughter can really be saved. The sound of screams from the village brought Gaoyuan to that town, and now he could feel a very weak spiritual energy coming from inside that girl. Whether it was spiritual cleansing or soul resonance, each person was different in their own way, and some people evolve quickly after leveling up, while others spend days and nights to complete their awakening. And from what Gaoyuan could see around him, this was an extremely difficult element to acquire, and it was the element of fire. This time it seemed that humanity had been lucky, and Gaoyuan thought that if those old men knew about it, he hoped they wouldn't at least go crazy. He had a potion that could extract the spiritual power in the air, so it would be easy to absorb it. Suddenly, in parallel, Yuziyu was surprised when the system notified him that Qing's mutated soul was about to reach level 5, and the protagonist realized that it seemed that taking his life essence hadn't made Qing evolve that quickly. Qing's soul was approaching him from all directions, and in parallel Gao Yuan uses his potion on Ling, and Qing says he was feeling a great power coming on. Suddenly, a great light appears and Ling wakes up, leading the people of the village shocked because she woke up even after Gao Yuan used the potion. Everyone said that he was really worthy of belonging to the army, and it was surprising that he was able to heal and revive a person in an instant, and everyone thanked Gao Yuan. But Gao Yuan was shocked and wondering what was going on because he thought it would be impossible for Ling to wake up like that, not even a single day having passed. That acquired element was really impressive, and at the same time Yuziyu was surprised that Qing had managed to awaken, although not in his original body, but in Ling's. In any case, they could get used to it. In any case, they could get used to this body for the time being, and the protagonist told them that the group of humans would be spending the night there, and there was no time to waste on questions. Meanwhile, in the village, people continued to celebrate with a big meal for the visitors, including the soldier Junyi, who was drinking. Qing relayed all the visions to Yuziyu, and meanwhile Ling asked Gao Yuan what those men were doing in a place like this. He replied that there were mutated monsters in that village, and they were there so that they could investigate what was going on. Ling asked if that was really their only reason, as no one had ever seen a mutated beast in that place before, and Gao Yuan replies that the Lingli satellite detected several abnormalities there, and that was the reason they were there. Yuziyu realizes that in some unexpected way, humans have developed devices to detect spiritual powers, and tells Qing to ask about the Lingli satellite some more. The Lingli satellite could only detect abnormalities in certain places, yet it still didn't provide the exact coordinate. Thanks to the different concentration of spiritual power in that area, the satellite was pointing directly at that area. Gao Yuan went on to say that this was why they had carried out that expedition, and first they had to start by evacuating the city, and then they would need to confirm whether that spiritual concentration posed any danger to everyone and whether new mutant beasts were being born. Yuziyu was surprised that there was a device to measure the concentration of a regional spiritual power, and yet they hadn't noticed its existence, which relieved him because he wasn't in a real dangerous situation yet. He thought he'd been detected after fighting that snake, but now that Yuziyu had released that mist, they wouldn't be able to see anything or discover him. Next time, he intended to be careful not to create a spectacle so as not to be discovered. After all, the satellites had a large-scale search area, and that was why he thought the inspectors should be wearing trackers. The protagonist felt almost as if these humans were really going to start scaring him, and it could be that the next day or in a couple of days, he could end up being found. That's why Yuziyu knew that he would have to fight them at some point, and everything would depend completely on what happened the next day. The next morning, Ling decided to follow the men up the mountain. The village chief didn't know what she was thinking with that decision, but if his granddaughter followed him, it would possibly be better for her because she had completely lost her memory and no longer knew many things about that world. Gao Yuan replied that there was no need to worry and promised that he would take his granddaughter to a doctor so that she could cure her amnesia, and later other troops would come down from the mountain to collect her. So they all leave and time passes as the troops make their way through the forest thick with mist, and even Gao Yuan is shocked because he has never seen such thick fog before in his life. The men asked the captain why the fog wasn't dispersing because it seemed to be getting thicker and thicker and they couldn't see anything anymore, and it had been 2 days since they'd been in this strange weather. They felt like they were getting lost because it seemed like they had been there before, and Gao Yuan realized that they had walked for 2 long hours but still hadn't found anything. However, the monsters were nearby and the confrontation would happen very soon. It had been a few hours since they had continued walking in circles, and they all realized that something strange had happened to that place, as the sacred power of the mist had risen to 17,000 points. What's more, if a mutant beast reached that level of power, Gao Yuan knew that things would be worrying. But Yuziyu himself was disturbed by how frightening Gao Yuan was to stand up even now. However, they didn't know that if they kept breathing in that mist, they would eventually start to regret entering his forest, but now it was too late for them to go back where they came from. Hours later, Gao Yuan and his army finally found a way out, thinking they had got rid of the fog created by Yuziyu, and made their way deeper into the mountain. The men were feeling worse and worse with every step they took, and they were all shocked to hear the sound of monsters nearby. Yi says that what they heard was the howl of a wolf and tells everyone to keep their weapons in hand and stay alert for any chance of attack that might occur, and if they encounter a pack of wolves, they should attack and honor their captain. Suddenly, the wolves started attacking the humans inside the space, causing them to scream and create a huge mess in the dense fog. Everyone looks on in shock as he is attacked full-on by a wolf, the one known as the mutant fog wolf, and Gao Yuan guides everyone to start shooting at him and to attack the wolf, not the captain. They all hit the wolf's body and try to save Ye's life, including Gao Yuan, who goes after the wolf full of hatred so that he can save his captain's life. Gao Yuan rescues Ye's body, but the wolf doesn't give up and continues attacking each of them non-stop even after receiving all the shots to its body, causing a powerful wound to Gao Yuan. They are all confused by what was happening inside that strange mist, and Gao Yuan wonders what exactly was going on and if she even had a conscience of her own to react in such a way. But not only has the mutant wolf appeared, but a bestial badger also appears so that it can attack them, and they soon recognize it as a monster with an aura of fire. The men prepared to attack it with gunfire too. The power of this mutant beast of medium difficulty was between 4,000 and 6,000 points, so it was immune to bullets and any artillery. Its power and strength were enough to defeat an entire team, even an armed one, and if that beast evolves, it could destroy an entire city. Yi tells everyone to use the penetrating bullets against the mutant monsters, and they all fire their attack, which cause a huge explosion of fire. The men are shocked that the bullets really did hit their target, but what they didn't expect was that the mutant wolves wouldn't suffer any damage after all. They were distraught, wondering what had happened, because they had certainly hit a penetrating bullet, but even more wolves had appeared instead of killing what was present, and now there were more than 3 of them threatening their lives. Yi was frustrated, wondering if they were really going to die like that, and Yuziyu called them idiots because he had always warned them about that dense fog before, and now the only way out for them was to die, so they shouldn't blame him for that decision. Suddenly, Gao Yuan ran out and told everyone to back off because he had to do something and they had to get out of there quickly. So, the army began to retreat, and Gao Yuan was frustrated because even after giving the bestial badger so many attacks, he was still chasing them. What's more, he fired 2 penetrating bullets at the mutant monster, but it didn't look like it was going to survive much longer. This time, he lost 6 of his brothers in that battle, which left them frustrated with the outcome as they had to retreat with their bodies. Yuziyu was relieved that everyone had finally decided to retreat and hoped that he wouldn't have to see them again so soon. He wished he could kill them, but that would end up bringing in even more troops than were there now, so he hoped there wouldn't be any more wild animals and fog scattered around just to defend his territory. He decided to suspend the search on the mountain until the humans returned again, because Yuziyu needed to evolve to a point where the humans had no chance of beating him. Yuziyu asks Ching how things were going, and she replies that they put her in a car and now she was making her journey with the first team, and asks if the protagonist would really like to control that body every day. Yuziyu agreed, still surprised because he had never imagined that Ching's twin sister would awaken the talent of yin and yang to that extent, which should certainly be taken into the area of mysteries, being a great opportunity to invade the human world. The soldiers were all enchanted by Ling's beauty, thinking that she really was as beautiful as the doctor had recommended, and they even began to imagine that she was trying to open up to them. Although the men were moved by her charm, suddenly Ling just fell asleep and they all decided to nickname her the Sleeping Girl or something similar. Ching says she can't take it anymore, and Yuziyu tells her to calm down, realizing that Ching had been controlling Ling for a long 15 hours, and it seemed that she had a limit to how much she could use her ability. Yuziyu says that she would give more of her life essence regularly so that she could expand her time limit controlling Ling's body, which makes Ching excited. Ching's life essence not only purifies her soul but also accelerates her evolution, and it seemed to be a delicious nectar for her. So the mutant wolves return, and Yuziyu thanks them for their hard work during the battle, but the wolves also leave the badger in front of him all bruised up after the fight. Yuziyu realizes that Gao Yuan really was a difficult mortal to beat, and other ordinary beasts would have died with just one blow, but the badger managed to resist even after everything. The protagonist says that thanks to this they deserve to receive their life essence as a reward, and if they don't act quickly, they will explode and die. Yuziyu hands them the life essence, saying that after evolving his eyesight has really improved a lot since then, and so he was determined to organize these stones and prepare all the ground. So Yuziyu takes the stones and also works to get the water, almost finishing his new project. He adds the essence of life to the water and thus creates a sparkling lake that was very beautiful, but also gave the mutants the opportunity to drink from it. This was because life essence diluted in water was much easier to drink than directly from the source. Yuziyu told everyone to drink it because it was his reward for his efforts, but to his surprise the mutant monsters all started to enter the water, making him realize that it was also a good idea for them to choose to use it as a pool. A drop of his life essence turned it into a spiritual pool. It still couldn't compare in any way to the underground Ling River, but the good thing was that by entering its waters, you could heal your wound. The Ling River had water that could contain large amounts of aura, and thanks to his good relationship with the underground Ling River, Yuziyu's roots were constantly absorbing its aura. In just 10 days, the main trunk grew more than 1 diameter. Its 3 roots practically reached a depth of 200 or 300 meters. The underground Ling River was so useful to her that it should be put to good use with the mutated beast. Yuziyu could sense a very spiritual aura, and later on this could become a raw material that everyone might want to possess. At the same time, Gao Yuan took Ling to the Extraordinary Institute and led her deeper into the building, saying that the president was waiting for them now. Meanwhile, a man inside the institute institute realizes that they have finally arrived, curious to know how much she could compare to the others or how powerful Ling really was. Inside the institute, the president welcomes Gao Yuan and says that it seemed that this time he had really found a tough opponent to face, and Gao Yuan replies that it wasn't like that, at least as far as they knew, but that mountain had evolved a lot since the beginning and now there were many mutant beasts scattered around, beasts that were even too powerful to be faced normally. The president says that he heard that there was a dense fog and asks if it affected their strength, and Gao Yuan replies that it didn't affect much and apologizes if it affected the whole nation, and unfortunately they hadn't found an explanation for it yet. The president agreed that it was a complicated variation to explain, but considering that the fog wasn't harmful, they could temporarily classify it as a code yellow mountain, and if there were any abrupt changes, they should immediately switch to code red. Before Gao Yuan left, the president said he had heard that he had brought a girl to the institute, and he agreed, saying that she had the elemental talent of fire and the new generation should be the strongest of all. Code green was used for the territory where the human population lived, code yellow was a place with a certain degree of danger that required vigilance, and code red was an area where the human race should look after itself and survive if possible. Last but not least, there was the most dangerous territory, which was called the Forbidden Territory. Before he had recovered all his spiritual energy, he would already have attracted the attention of the whole world, and after spreading his spiritual energy, it became a place where no living being could enter, better known as the Bermuda Triangle. It was possible to consider Yuziyu as very lucky, because despite being under the eyes of the nation for this code yellow, he could still depend on it, because it seemed to be spreading slowly through all the regions except the cities, and the vast majority were known as code yellows. In parallel, meanwhile, the Badger had reached the 6th level and the Hong Fok the 8th level, and both had started training together since the most recent event. Yuziyu tells the two of them to stop fighting like that and thinks about how since then, the humans haven't sent an army, and it seemed that they were safe for the time being. Then the mutant wolves appear bringing some dead animals, and Yuziyu congratulates them on doing the job of bringing living creatures to him. Yuziyu successfully kills them and gets more experience points, and it seemed to him that the best thing about taming those animals was that it got easier and easier. Even if he didn't ask for help, the mutants would always help him hunt wild animals, and besides, he could wait until he gained evolutionary points, so he could enjoy the best of this world. The protagonist lets the animals eat what's left of them after gaining his experience, and realizes that the scene of the wolves eating was actually quite sinister. Yuziyu wonders if Hong wasn't eating with them just to maintain his elegance or something, but the mutant monkeys seemed to continue eating his leaves and hiding without any shame in his face. The golden monkey was at the 4th level, had the talent of unlimited absorption, and a body that could absorb beneficial substances in large quantities. This surprised Yuziyu because the monkey had managed to awaken its own talent all by itself. Now, the protagonist had obtained 172 evolutionary points and could begin to see what he could do to use them. He could use them to increase his branches by 5 evolutionary points, and he could also add 50 branches, so he would have 250 branches in all, which was quite a bargain. The system asked him if he really wanted to spend 5 evolution points to get 250 branches, and Yuziyu decided to go in parts, starting with this part. The level of his branches varied between 1 and 25. Their hardness was similar to that of iron, they could move freely, they could secrete toxins that cause paralysis in the enemy, and they could also be recovered by taking life essence without the user losing their evolution points. Yuziyu was shocked at how many new things he had received in this evolution, and now he could use toxins and paralysis to use these buffs during battles, the first time he had heard of this effect. Yuziyu uses one of his branches on the Badger and is surprised that just using a branch has left it perfectly paralyzed, which makes him hopeful that he can use these abilities against humans too. Ching asked him if he didn't know about the honey badger's strength, and he told him that as well as being omnivorous, it also had anti-toxin protection. The worst thing was that, with his current strength, his poison was completely useless, and Yuziyu thanks her for warning him, because it seemed that he was still strong. But he was also surprised to see Ching and asked when she had come back, to which Ching replied that she also had the right to live her life and eat, and wouldn't do anything more than that. She says that Gao Yuan told her that he would take her to the Extraordinary Institute the next day, and then she would have to pass a test before entering the Institute of Spiritual Power, but if she failed, she would return immediately. While Ling's body had just awakened the fire element, Ching was mastering her spiritual power at the same time, which made Yuziyu hope that there would be enough human resources in the future. He was relieved because at that moment he had the essence of life, and very soon a supposed monster that combines the different advantages of animals and humans would appear, born from Ching as something completely new. Yuziyu said that it looked like he would need to give her more of his life essence the next day. After all, she would need to infiltrate the humans again, and told her never to let herself be beaten beaten by others. If anyone got in the way, she knew what to do, and Qing agreed with her master's word, and back at the institute, Ling promised that she wouldn't fail the test. The Extraordinary Institute specialized in spiritual power. Gao Yuan told Ling that most of the students had awakened their powers thanks to the institute's teachers, and that the institute existed thanks to its two foundations, spiritual power and extraordinary people. Everyone wanted to be there because it was much better than any university. There were many people who had awakened their power throughout the nation like Ling, and now she had joined the others who were waiting there. A girl notices Ling and wonders who the foreigner with the smell of mud is, but soon everyone's attention is drawn when the principal appears to talk to the students. The principal said that the world was becoming more and more mundane, and every day more and more humans were dying. They were the change, and if a human being couldn't evolve, then they would be completely eradicated from the world. The principal said that very soon they would be granted the passage of time, but before that they had to get stronger because that way they could guarantee the survival of the next generations too, and this place was built for that purpose. This was the birth of a new generation, and all the students agreed with the principal's words. So another man said that the first round of tests would now begin, and first they would start with the spiritual power test. The students began to have their spiritual powers assessed according to the amount they had, and several of them were surprised because the vast majority had too low an amount of spiritual power. The man was frustrated because compared to the first generations, this was by far the worst of them all, looking like the worst class that teacher had taken in his life. Then, the student Yan Ling, being the first student to have a high quality of spiritual power, reaching 2,000 points and being qualified as superior, which was an astonishing ranking. This was the highest ranking so far, and compared to previous generations, she was the strongest of the current students as well as being a beautiful woman. Ling thought she didn't know why everyone was so easily surprised because not everyone had to have such a high ranking, and now she was the only one different from the students. Finally, Ling was called to take the test, where the teacher was still thinking about the score of 2,000 points because it should have taken Ling 2 years to possess so much spiritual power, and if she evolved, the hope of the nation could even be restored to the world. Besides, the teacher wouldn't mind if the next generation came up with students with a spiritual power of 10 points, and the principal continued to say that it might be alright because Ling would certainly match or surpass Ling's power. Gao Yuan replied that he wouldn't say anything about it, but he didn't think you could really overestimate the element of fire, which only made the principal more and more interested in Ling. When Ling took the test, the teacher was shocked when a great power exploded before his eyes, and he realized that she had 5,000 points of spiritual power, the strongest of them all, to the point of making the teacher want to run away at how impressive that score was. Everyone was completely shocked, especially as Ling's power was still climbing past 6,000 points, causing a huge explosion in front of the students. Ling apologizes because she thought she had broken the power calculation machine, but the teacher was still almost blinded by what he had just seen, and it looked like this was going to be his best student ever. This made the principal smile, and Ling stared in astonishment because it seemed like a bad joke that a foreigner like her had got such a huge score. The teacher went on to say that what they would do next would be the ability test, and he was very proud of the results they had achieved that time, and all the candidates who passed the 100 points could be sent to different testing grounds according to their power, be it low, medium, or high. The institute's ability test would begin, and the one who would face each of the students alone was none other than Gao Yuan himself. Ling asked him if he really thought he could face them alone, and he said yes, because the next test was very simple, and any of them who could take it in an hour would pass, no matter what method they used. Meanwhile, Yuziyu was feeling that it was a big day and was distracted by a badger that started defecating right in front of his tree while the student's exam was going on. Everyone was exhausted, and Gao Yuan said that it seemed they weren't using all their methods to win, and if they didn't put in at least a little effort, they would certainly fail. Gao Yuan warned them that there were still 10 minutes left before they could pass the test, and that they weren't trying hard enough to pass, but Ling didn't intend to be eliminated in any way. Ling is surprised when Ling starts using her firepower and lunges at Gao Yuan, who dodges her attack in time. He realized that she was using her firepower to increase her speed and wondered how long she would be able to control this great power. Gao Yuan says that she shouldn't think she would be easy prey, but to his and Ling's surprise, her powers were impressive. She almost hit Gao Yuan full on with her consecutive attack, with Ling saying that he wouldn't escape. Gao Yuan was surprised that she was even able to suspend herself in the air, but soon Ling attacked Ling to knock her down, leaving Gao Yuan unable to understand anything that had just happened. But just as Ling falls to the ground, Ling takes the opportunity to touch Gao Yuan, who was still stunned by the random scene that had taken place before his eyes, and even though the director was surprised, he announces that the second test is over. Gao Yuan rushes out to see if Ling is alright and notices that she is bleeding. She remembers Yu Ziyu's words telling her to know what to do if anyone gets in her way, and Gao Yuan Yuan continues by saying that they should get out of there and run to the doctor right away because the test is over. Ling approaches, asking if they were really sure that Ling's power was 6,000, because since she failed, she should return to her village immediately. But Ling replies that anyone who messes with her will be eliminated, so she jumps on Ling and returns the attack she received earlier with surprising violence. Ling tells her to get off her back because the exam is over and surely Ling shouldn't be thinking about killing her now, but Ling agrees that she intended to do just that and says she'll kill her right now. Ling starts begging for her life until Gao Yuan holds Ling back, telling her to stop because she's also passed, and says that Ling was just trying to provoke her a bit to get the best out of her. Ling then smiles and agrees with Gao Yuan, leaving Ling passed out on the floor from shock at having thought she was going to die. Gao Yuan thinks that he didn't think Ling could survive if he kept provoking Ling like that. The director then told her to focus on training Ling immediately, and so she impressed Yuziyu with her skills by even passing the test. Ling had become a gifted girl who was able to enter a renowned institute at a young age. The Institute of the Extraordinary had surrendered to her great power, and they themselves wanted to give her special training. In addition, the inhabitants of Dashan had evacuated their village and everyone was now going to the city in order to have and live a better future, so they had to leave their village no matter how painful it was. In the end, the village was abandoned and time passed quickly and they were approaching winter. Yuziyu had been growing his branches during that time of year, as he had never had to rest like this before, and it seemed so cold that he was about to freeze to death. The smell of blood and death was coming soon, and he could even smell it in the air. In the northwest region, the soldiers continued their exploration, facing various mutated monsters. One of the soldiers says that after sacrificing many soldiers, they were finally able to enter the Spirit Stone mine, which was really fantastic. Suddenly, they were surprised by a large mutant beast, and were shocked to find what was known as a silver centipede. At the same time, Yuziyu had strengthened all his branches on the other side, and very soon he would be reaching the limit of his evolution, just needing to strengthen his 8 roots so that he could reach level 2 of the extraordinary. Once he reached this level, no one would be able to kill him unless he dropped a nuclear bomb. However, the spiritual fluctuation emitted by reaching the 2nd level would make it easier for human beings to discover its location. After being reborn as a tree, for the first time Yuziyu felt frightened by the horrors that humans commit. Suddenly, Qin comes running in saying that something big has happened, and the scene cuts to the Extraordinary Institute, where Gao Yuan has arrived to tell everyone that the entire squad that traveled to the northwest region has been massacred. The power of the Spirit Stone mine had been unleashed and was attracting a huge number of mutant beasts. At first, there were only rats and mutant birds with a spiritual power of 4,000 points, but now a level 2 centipede of the Extraordinary appeared with more than 120,000 spiritual power. The Extraordinary's troops arrived, and it seemed that the targets this time were not at all easy to face. Yuziyu was shocked that the humans had discovered the Spirit Stone mine, and Qing agreed by relaying the message to his master. Qing was now at the 9th level, and continued to tell Yuziyu that they had finally sent more than a dozen extraordinary soldiers to this place. Spirit Stone was a special ore with great spiritual power that could accelerate the growth of bodily strength. Qing tells us that thanks to this discovery on the part of the humans, in a short period of time, they have evolved into mutant creatures. Yuziyu was shocked and thought that it must be impossible because he had even thought of reaching out to humanity after reaching the 3rd level of the extraordinary, but unexpectedly the humans had discovered another way to catch up with the levels of the mutant creatures in a short space of time. The protagonist became frustrated and almost felt that he could collapse because of this situation. Qin goes on to say that it wasn't just this problem, as a level 2 silver centipede of the extraordinary began to appear, and this centipede massacred the entire first squad. Soon after, it also defeated all of the extraordinary's troops and almost half of them were killed. Yuziyu thinks that this level 2 centipede was like a terrifying beast and wonders how it managed to reach this level, considering that it might even have the ability to steal power. Yuziyu asks what the humans' problem was and if they didn't counterattack, and Qin replies that the silver centipede appeared by surprise and the organization hadn't prepared for it, being the first evolved beast they faced in their lives. The protagonist asked if he thought it could be a good rival to him, and Qin replied that it was difficult to say because according to the human power algorithm, the silver centipede had a spiritual power of 120,000 and its master now only had 10,000. Yuziyu understood her point of view and said that he could continue to inform her if they were in trouble, and Qing agreed. Returning to the institute, Ling approached her master and said that she would like to travel to the northwest to take a look at the situation, leaving him confused and calling her crazy when she asked what kind of madness she thought she could do. But if she was that interested in the silver centipede, when she captured it, she would take a good look at it, and asked if she was planning to create a big spectacle or something similar to want to go there. He said that it shouldn't cause so many problems because it would soon have its its mineral ready. Ling said that she still didn't understand why the centipede had appeared so suddenly and how it hadn't been detected before, and he replied that it was possible that the centipede had the ability to hide itself, unless the cause of the problem was the spirit stone mine itself. The scene returns to Yuziyu, who was surprised to see some birds that had captured the queen ant and were now all running towards him, but he has evolved so much that he no longer needs to worry. Yuziyu decides to welcome the ants and starts attacking them while Hong shows up to help as well. The protagonist realized that he had almost 900 points available and now might be the ideal time to evolve his branches and roots once and for all, this time being able to strengthen his 8 roots at once so that he could beat the silver centipede. Yuziyu decided to spend his 800 evolutionary points to strengthen the remaining 8 roots, and in the blink of an eye he began to feel an enormous heat and his roots evolved to the point of creating enormous havoc in the surroundings. Despite the pain, he needed to get stronger no matter how much it hurt, needing to endure just a little longer to reach the level he wanted. And meanwhile, on the other side of the wood, the badger was in the middle of winter hunting for something to eat and luckily caught a fish, but ended up meeting a small family of animals and had to share the food, making him all too happy to help. But suddenly a huge creature appeared behind the badger and trampled on the family of animals he had just helped, completely enraging him. The mutant wolves sensed something was up and later found the badger's body in the snow crying after having been unable to protect those animals. When the wolves brought the badger to Yuziyu, he realized that this time he had faced an opponent stronger than him, and it was a great relief that he had managed to escape by luck, so he offered more of the essence of life to him. Furthermore, Yuziyu decides to submerge the badger in the pool and sends the wolves off to find the culprit, also sending the red fox, Hong, to meet up and make sure the culprit is killed. Yuziyu says that the badger couldn't continue wandering through this dense fog and move on while injured because it needed to get stronger to survive, and they certainly couldn't leave those threats alive. Qing reversed herself and said that she would like to go too, causing the protagonist to be surprised and ask when she had returned. Qing says that she came to inform him about the spirit stones and that the stone could have the effect of isolating spiritual power, which is why the silver centipede managed to kill everyone. Qing tells Yuziyu to calm down because he will soon have his own spirit stone in a few days and it could soon be more useful, but the protagonist denies it because she was his support and he should be the one to protect her. Once she reached level 3 of the extraordinary, Yuziyu's spiritual power would not be isolated even by 2 spirit stones. Qing thought that in reality, once Yuziyu reached this level, it was obvious that there would be a big impact, but that being the case, she couldn't keep hiding, and she was looking forward to it. Yuziyu told Qing not to worry because he should just take his time finding out about the spirit stone mine, while the spirits, who were more sensitive to this aura, like Yuziyu, were the only ones who knew about the underground river. He wanted to be in charge of solving these problems. But suddenly the protagonist gets stuck thinking about the underground Ling River and wonders where the aura of that river came from. He wondered if that aura didn't come from the spirit stone mine and thought that it was obvious that that monster hadn't been detected by Yuziyu because of the spirit stone mine. The strength of that new opponent was even more powerful than the war serpent he had faced in the past, and Yuziyu quickly told the mutants that he had changed his mind and that no one should seek revenge because they would end up being killed along the way. Qing asks if the monster that wounded the badger was in the spirit stone mine, and if so, there was no way of finding it. Yuziyu replied that he wasn't sure yet, but he should check, and that's why he wanted them all to split up to take 3 different routes. Yuziyu tells Hong and the other wolves to go to the place where the fight started so that they can locate and follow its scent to find the monster that hurt the badger. In the meantime, the others should continue their patrols of the area and check the air in case they see anything suspicious. These could be holes, craters, and various other things, and they should even check the waterfalls in case there is any suspicious activity. Yuziyu tells Qing to follow the hole she dug to get directly to the river, but tells her to remember that before she takes any action, she should go back to inform him and not to provoke her enemies or she'll end up being destroyed. All the monsters leave to carry out their respective orders, and Yuziyu hopes that his theories are correct, and soon Qing finds something along the way. Yuziyu's roots have covered the entire underground pit and the only way forward is up, and the wolves and other animals have also discovered a very suspicious entrance. Qing continues along the path and realizes that just as Yuziyu had said, there were spirit stones everywhere and she never thought she would find them so quickly, and then she hears a roar coming from not far away. She thought that the heavenly power of this battle cry was overwhelming and was even more powerful than Yuziyu's cry. She soon finds the giant tortoise and realizes that it must have been the one who seriously injured the badger a little earlier on the surface. Its celestial power was far superior, and luckily, Qing found it in time, otherwise she didn't know for sure, but it was still possible that the turtle had been able to evolve into a huge monster that would be difficult to deal with. Qing also realized that nearby there were plants growing in minerals, and that this was the well-known blood herb, a herb born from the lincture mine, considered an advanced treasure by the giant tortoise. That kind of sacred herb should be of great use to Yuziu, and thinking about it, Ching realized that if he didn't extract it, the giant tortoise would gain more and more power as time went on. But to Ching's surprise, as she approaches, the turtle suddenly attacks and causes a huge mess by sending the flower flying away. Ching wonders how it was possible for the turtle to see her and wonders if she was able to reach the extraordinary level so quickly. Yuziu realizes that Ching had started attacking the great beast and also that the badger had suddenly disappeared, and it seemed that he had gone off to try to get revenge as well and get involved in the mission somehow. Meanwhile, Ching continued his battle against the turtle using his mental strength and was only a few steps away from reaching the 9th level. The turtle's attack caused such a noise that even the wolves and the Hong Fok noticed the movement, causing destruction and the opening to the surface. Ching managed to steal the flower in time and now just needed to get the opportunity to return to Yuziu, but the turtle kept following her the whole way. The turtle trapped her inside a stone prison, but even though Ching managed to get through, the flower was still trapped inside, and it seemed that the turtle monster didn't really think it would take the sacred herb if it was that easy. Ching wondered what he should do because he didn't think he could get to Yuziu in time, and if he managed to escape, it would all be over. But suddenly, someone arrived to interfere in the battle, none other than the evolved badger, Ping-Tu, ready to take revenge for the horrible actions of the huge turtle. Ching told Ping-Tu to wait because something was wrong and asked him how he could penetrate the sacred barrier when it was level 6, but soon realized that he didn't seem to be listening to him in the first place. Ping-Tu attacks the turtle with hatred and begins his battle against it, quickly causing damage and injuries that surprise the turtle itself. He bites it despite receiving other damage in return for his violent movements, being sent away while Ching just watches the whole battle. She says that if Ping-Tu just kept attacking, he would end up dying, but even with his teeth broken and bleeding almost to death, he still remembered the death of that family of animals who died by the turtle's paws, and he couldn't forgive that in any way even if he ended up dying in the process, which is why he kept standing even now, in the face of his own imminent death. Could he survive and win, or would he die trying? That's what we'll find out in the next few chapters. Our story continues to focus on the honey badger, and how it was a carnivorous weasel-like animal that was distributed throughout West Africa and South Asia. Its body was thick and it had a large head and very powerful claws. Its skin and tough paws could withstand the attacks of invading enemies, making it a more vengeful creature. In addition, the badger was the wildest animal in the world, so you couldn't underestimate it, especially when you saw it go into combat against the great tortoise to seek revenge. To find out how powerful he is today, you must first subscribe to this channel and make sure you receive notifications of all the summary videos. So, let's get on with our story. During the fight, Ching notices that Ping-Tu's coat color is changing, but he's actually working on getting stronger and evolving even more from when he was now. He begins by using a burst of volts, and to Ching's surprise, Ping-Tu fires an attack at the large turtle and causes great damage to the animal. Ching helps Ping-Tu in the battle using his telekinesis, and Ping-Tu continues firing attack at the turtle's body at a speed that again surprised Ching. Because of the turtle's size, he was making the most of its extreme speed, but he still kept getting hurt even with his efforts to continue the battle. Ching wondered if they could really win after so much effort, since this was a confrontation between a level 7 animal and a monster at the first level of extraordinary. But Ping-Tu continues to attack even though he is bleeding, and causes an electric shock attack on the turtle that knocks it to the ground with a huge impact, which makes Ching celebrate because they have managed to win the battle with great success. But just as he was thinking this, a new attack was sent at Ping-Tu that sent him flying far away, and the monster rose again. Ching saw how wounded Ping-Tu was, but he still managed to fire off consecutive attacks one after the other that made him bleed to the point where he looked like he was ready to die. This made Ching interfere to also try to cause some kind of damage. But if he was facing a fight, he should never back down. Even if his opponent was stronger, he still had to try to beat him so that he could continue to evolve. He didn't fear the powerful attacks of his opponents, nor did he fear death, nor should he fear his failures, because he always did his best to achieve his goal. Still, with an unquenchable thirst for revenge, Ping-Tu was willing to continue attacking even though he was about to die. At this point, Ping-Tu's brain was no longer reasoning, and although his body was weak and bloodied, all he could think about was defeating the giant turtle, and he was ready to die so that he could restore his dignity. And with tears in his eyes, Ping-Tu continued to attack without stopping and without thinking of anything other than fulfilling his will to win. Ching shouted for Ping-Tu to stop right now, but before a new attack could hit him, suddenly a powerful root hit the big turtle and sent it flying away, surprising everyone. The one who began to interfere in the fight was none other than Yuziu, who immediately held Ping-Tu back, and Ching quickly recognized the roots coming from his master, and it seemed that he arrived just in time them to interfere. Yuziyu communicated with Qing and said that she wanted to be transferred to the place, and she agreed to do so, telling Pingtu that her master would help them. Thus, the protagonist manages to wake up alongside Qing to continue the battle that Pingtu had started, ready to avenge his friend who had worked so hard to be able to defeat a monster of that size almost single-handedly. Yuziyu realized that his suspicions were correct and a mutant beast with elemental attribute had just appeared. It had secretly evolved in the spirit mine, using it to hide its aura. That was an extraordinary level 1 earth rock turtle with the special ability to tremble the earth, shake the ground, and throw countless broken stones. Yuziyu looks at Pingtu and says that he really was incredible, because despite facing a transcendent first order, he fought on until now, and even though he was seriously injured, he still fought with his life at stake. It should have been painful, but now Yuziyu tells him to rest and leave the rest to him. Pingtu starts crying, and the huge turtle starts running towards them to continue the battle. Qing says that the earth turtle's defense was surprisingly high and that it couldn't face it head-on like that. Yuziyu uses her piercing stab attack and destroys a piece of the turtle's body, which leaves her and Qing in shock at the scene and its power of destruction. Yuziyu thought that it still wouldn't be easy to fight with brother Pingtu being held in his arms, so he threw him onto the back of Hong, the fox who was waiting in the shadows to rescue his wounded companion. Hong runs away, which makes the turtle furious and fires more of his attack at his opponent, but Yuziyu destroys all his attack without thinking twice about it. The protagonist grabs the big turtle and lifts it into the air. After all, its main attribute would be useless if it wasn't on the ground, so it could attack with the earth, and now it was just a turtle waiting to be slaughtered by his hands. And so Yuziyu did, attacking the turtle in order to take its life, thus preparing the final blows so that Pingtu could see from start to finish what the battle would be like. Yuziyu finishes the battle with the turtle and receives more than 1,000 evolution points as a reward, surprising Pingtu. Yuziyu is also amazed at the huge amount of ore down there and is happy that he is now very rich, and Qing says that he has also found a spirit herb that would be very useful to him and that it took a lot of effort to be able to get it from the giant turtle's lair. Yuziyu is even more impressed because that victory has brought several gratifying benefits and decides that they could start digging and moving everything so that they can take matters into their own hands and manage the ores. To bring back more spirit stones, Yuziyu dug a cave under the roots of the tree for the animals to return. The fastest animals are the red fox Hong and the four-wind wolves, which transport themselves along with the spirit stones using the tree net. Yuziyu used this time to excavate 10 more small caves so that Qing, Hong, and the others could use the spirit stones to cultivate inside the cave as well. The protagonist said that they were almost ready to move on, even though it had only taken them half a day to cultivate as many ores as they could. According to Qing, this was supposed to be a medium-sized spirit stone mine, which was the largest one occupied by the centipede. Yuziyu thought that this time, he wasn't sure how it could happen. With the rebirth of the aura, ordinary birds migrated south, while mutant birds stayed because they could withstand the winter cold. This would be the most regrettable decision of their lives, because during this period when Yuziyu became even stronger than he was at the beginning, he continued to hunt animals and experiment with their roots. As a result, the color of his body changed and either of his eyes became even more aggressive than before, but his head remained bald and without any kind of breakthrough. But it wasn't important what his face looked like, so he opened his system panel to see his status. His statuses said that he now had a life expectancy of 500 years and more than 13,000 evolution points. His abilities had also become even stronger than before with an even greater number of skills, including his new ability to manipulate the earth element. Yuziyu is shocked by this and realizes that everything probably happened because he absorbed his essence during his first evolution. This made the protagonist very excited to be able to start testing his new ability, so he was able to create several sharp spikes of earth to create attacks, and Yuziyu realized that he could now understand why humans called the second order of transcendence a disaster. However, the earth element's attack range was only about 100 meters, but it should get even stronger each time it upgraded. He couldn't pull out his roots, but if he could manipulate the earth, he hoped to be able to walk freely. Inherent abilities, which evolve with the creature and become more powerful, was enough to be able to level up last time, but Yuziyu realizes that this time things were different. He tells the system to upgrade his inherent abilities. This way, he could evolve his enhanced regeneration, reinforced regeneration consumption, and also reinforced regeneration capacity. Yuziyu realized that improving his regeneration would be very useful because it could be a real lifesaver. Even if most of his body and even his roots were destroyed by nuclear weapons, he could still be resurrected from the remaining roots of the trees that were scattered on the ground. He began to evolve his inherent ability and was surprised that his regenerative capacity was so strong, and now everything around him was alive and well. The speed of regeneration was still terrible, but at least it was one step further. further. Qing then appeared and was surprised to see how her master had changed since his evolution, and now his body proportion was almost 20 meters higher than before. She says that he could now master a spiritual power of around 203,000 points, and so the silver centipede could no longer be his opponent in any way. Suddenly, the birds return to make a report to Yuziyu, and Qing tells them that they said they had found a suspicious target and returned to report it first, but the protagonist tells them that the suspect they found was something they had literally just finished solving, which leaves the animals surprised. One of the mutants said that he would like to see that flower that was growing on UZY, and that was the rock flower, and apparently it had a crystallization of the large element that formed that spiritual flower that was much more powerful than the essence of life. This was due to the excess of energy emissions, thus causing the vision mutant to reach level 9, which surprised the protagonist with the leap in levels, as it seemed that his ability was really quite frightening. But apart from that, what surprised him most was that the bison started talking to Yuziyu, saying that he was the tree god, and the protagonist could only think that after evolving to the 9th level, the spirit consciousness might start to awaken. Hong was still at level 8, but he could soon reach level 9 at that rate too. If he could cultivate it well, he could also awaken his consciousness in the future, and so they could get stronger and stronger as time went on. Over the next few days, Yuziyu continually expanded the cave. The red lemurs, monkeys, wolves, bison, and other creatures were constantly moving the ore. Not long after that, Qing returned to Ling's body in the Transcendence Institute. Now, her body and spirit were in perfect harmony, and the fire attribute came from the physical body and the spiritual power came from the spiritual body. Ling met her teacher, who showed her a monster, telling her that it had a mixture of human and werewolf genes and was a completely new form of life that had been created. At the same time, Ping-Tu was sitting and reflecting by himself when he was slapped by Yuziyu, who complained that he was sitting there and complaining, and told him to get back to work right away. Meanwhile, Qing asks the professor if this was a hybrid of a human and an evolved wolf, and he replies that after conducting thousands of experiments, it still failed. The human regenerative cells couldn't resist the invasion of werewolf cells, which left Qing silent. The professor went on to say that the next batch of test subject would be arriving soon, and they were all people who had volunteered to be experimented on. The rise and fall of humanity was at stake, and it was a necessary sacrifice, and for them, their experiment had to be successful. If they could solve the problem of cell regeneration, if they could capture creatures with super regenerative powers, humanity could begin a new era of evolution, an era for the rebirth of human beings. The scene cuts to the Bayou Gorge, where a bespectacled boy asks Su-Hu if that misty mountain was really evil, because he says it would imprison people to die on the mountain. Hu replied that that was in the past, and now that they had Qian-Qin, it wouldn't be so difficult for them to go even deeper into the mountains. Qian-Qin was a woman with the awakened transcendentalist ability of intuition, and the bespectacled man agrees with Hu. Qin Xiao, who has awakened his transcendentalist body strengthening ability, says that the requirements weren't that difficult, as they just needed to collect some spiritual herbs and kill some mutant beasts. He asked Ling Feng if he didn't want to kill a few more mutant beasts for this last mission, as these rich people were paying enough to last a lifetime, and Feng replied that he wasn't interested in any of that. Qin said that something was coming, and the bespectacled man screamed in shock at the appearance of a mutant beast. But Zhao sends the animal away without a second thought, and comments that a grade 1 mutant boar wasn't worth much, being just a mutant beast. Who says that this time they were just exploring the mountains, although this is the yellow area, but it was only because of the spread of this mist that people were scared like that. Qin suddenly says that they should stop because he has a bad feeling about this, and tells everyone to run right now because they can't stay there any longer before it's too late. Suddenly a giant tiger leapt out from between them at Hu, taking a violent bite out of him that left everyone completely shocked by the scene. That was the mutated white tiger, with an entry level of 7 abilities. Among them were the mutant tiger claws that were sharp enough to tear everything apart, the tiger roar, where everything trembles and the opponent loses the courage to resist its attack. Seeing this, Zhao lunges at the giant tiger to attack it, and Kind tells him he shouldn't do it, but his warning wasn't good enough and he ends up being killed too. The bespectacled man fires wildly with his gun at the white tiger, but he too ends up getting caught in the mutant's mouth. Feng asks why Qin is just standing there and tells her to run right now because they can't defeat that level 7 king tiger, and at least one of them should escape so that they can inform the military about what's going on. Feng ended up being killed shortly after this warning, and the tiger kept an eye on Qin, who had survived, and she immediately became afraid because it seemed that she would also end up dying in that place. But suddenly, the tiger ends up being held in the air by several roots that appear to prevent Qin's death, and she herself ends up falling to the ground, wondering what was going on before fainting. The white tiger ended up being threatened by the mutants under Yuziyu's command, and Ping-Tu was even proud that his intimidation was working at least a little. They arrest the tiger, and Yuziyu realizes realizes that his life essence has been reinforced with new abilities, and once this life essence is developed, the enhanced essence would speed up the evolution of all things, and the subconscious would be closer to Yuzu. The protagonist decides to allow the user to improve his obedience and gives it to the strange white tiger, which quickly makes him very meek and gentle with Yuzu to the point of licking him, which doesn't exactly make him very happy. The life essence was more powerful than before, and so the white tiger became obedient at once, which made him wonder what might happen if he used it on people. Yuzu decided that he could try this on the people he had just rescued, and the person in question was none other than Qin. When Qin wakes up, she screams in shock at the sight of so many mutant beasts, and besides her, Zhao and Feng, also bound by Yuzu's roots, were also alive and trapped and crying for their lives without a second thought. Qin thought that she would surely end up dying in that place and never imagined that there could be a tree demon in that kind of place, until Yuzu lifted Qin up and put her life essence into her. Suddenly, she started talking about how everything was going to be destroyed, and the world was being taken over by giant trees. The sky, the earth, the animals, the birds, everything was being controlled by a tree. After that, the birth of the land of trees began. Her words made the protagonist curious, and Yuzu asked what her ability was, to which the girl replied that it was sixth sense and also intuition. Qin is surprised that the tree was talking to her, and Yuzu laughs at Qin after hearing her abilities, asking if this could even be considered an awakened ability. He says that she could stay there from now on and take care of his pets, which makes Qin angry that he thinks he can take her as his slave. But suddenly she agreed with Yuzu's words, and the protagonist realized that the essence of life really was impressive for giving such an immediate result, and her change of attitude was enviable. Yuzu even decided to take advantage and tell Qin to compliment him and take off his clothes, but she was embarrassed and refused, calling him a pervert, which made him realize that not everyone listened to him completely and there was still a certain autonomy in his decisions. So Yuzu decided to give his essence to the unconscious Zhao and Feng as well, hoping that these two could teach the bison and red foxes a little more about human beings. Originally, Yuzu could rely on Qin, but time was limited and teaching this sort of thing could be done by anyone rather than bothering Qin. So it was better just to let the humans take care of it themselves, and she also decided to build houses for the three of them to live in now, but in truth they should all be very grateful to have some use for them now. Qin showed her their new room, and now they could live a little further away from the underground cave. So, the chores were done, and Yuzu decided to get down to what really mattered now. Not only would he be able to move freely on land, but he could also become an existence known as the God of the Willows, and in normal times, he wouldn't have thought anything of it, but for this he could keep his spirits high. Yuzu considered that precisely because they were in extraordinary circumstances, anything was possible. When he reached the second level, he collected more than 5,000 evolution points, and killing the land tortoise gave him 8,000 evolution points. Entry-level creatures provided 10 evolution points per level, while Entry 2 creatures provided 20 evolution points. For creatures of the extraordinary category, the number of points was calculated according to their spiritual power, and if he killed a life with 80,000 points of spiritual power, he could obtain 8,000 evolution points. Apparently, manipulating the earth element would mean that he would need to absorb a large number of stones and hunt turtles in order to make even more use of the power to manipulate the earth, which was still at the first level. Yuzu decided to strengthen the earth element, and the system told him that to do so he would need to spend 1,000 evolution points, which shocked him because it was so expensive. But it made sense because he was a second level transcendental creature and it would cost a lot to keep evolving, but he decided to continue anyway and agreed to spend 1,000 points to get stronger. Suddenly, all the mutant animals are shocked by the change in the earth and the pressure, and several pillars of earth rise up, making Yuzu realize that his powers have become even stronger than before, but his range was still within 100 meters. The badger even ends up falling off the pillar of earth and whines because he was always the one who got hurt. The protagonist tells the system to reinforce the earth element, thus consuming 3,000 evolution points and powering the construction of more earth pillars and even lifting Pingtu up again. Every tree root in Yuzu's body was like a turtle, and now it could tear up the earth and cause earthquakes too. If all the tree roots were used at the same time, it would be enough to raise an earth wave hundreds of meters high and drown everything around it. But using spiritual energy on such a large scale could increase the risk of injury to his entire body. Once Yuzu had complete control of the land, he could travel freely around the world. The scene cuts to a country on another continent, where suddenly a man sees in the distance a powerful wave approaching the city through binoculars that surprises all the people in the city with the arrival of the huge tsunami. But not only does the water start destroying the city, sea monsters invade the city and start killing people, and they're all mutants. What appears beside them is a transcendentalist crimson octopus of the first order, as well as a transcendentalist fleshless golden eel of the third order. 5 hours later, in another location, in the White House, the man inside the White House shouts angrily, wondering what the military were doing and why the army's response was so slow to solve those problems in the first place. He shouts to ask if the number of dead has been counted, and asks a woman called Erin if she has found out about the mutant sea creatures. Erin agrees and says that according to the results, these mutant beasts should be from a large basilisk belonging to an ancient species. At first, it was estimated that it was about 100 meters long and weighed about 70,000 tons, and as for the spiritual power index, the lowest value was 170,000 points and the highest 250,000, which left all the people there totally stunned. One of them asked if it was possible to confirm the sea creature's current status, and apparently of the nuclear tree bombs launched to kill it, only one has reached its target. Now that it has retreated to the bottom of the sea, it was difficult to know its exact location, which makes the men furious, wondering what it should mean that only one was hit, because it couldn't even be known whether it was alive or dead, after all the creatures of the ocean were all after humanity, especially the creatures of the deep sea. Meanwhile, Qin, Zhao and Feng were working with Yuziyu to look after the animals there, trying to explain things and communicate with them in some way. They were having some problems communicating properly with the mutant animals, and Qin even shouts at the white tiger, who should have been paying attention to her instead of being distracted by other activities. She complains that she would go mad because that tiger was so dumb compared to the other beasts, so Zhao says that they should eat first and offers a plate of food to Qin, who is in shock because he was all bruised up after just trying to cook and getting beaten up. Zhao says that Qin didn't need to feel bad because he thought that he, the son of darkness, would become the master of that group of strange beasts, leaving Qin confused because he was only supposed to be the cook and nothing more. But Zhao openly said that he was a trainer now, even after being beaten all day by the beasts. It had been 3 days since they arrived there, and the tree hadn't killed them yet, and it was all because they were working exactly as Yuziyu asked. They had no idea that 300 kilometers from the city, there would be a giant tree with a conscience living there. If the army knew that there were supernatural beings who had developed consciousness, they would surely exterminate them all. Zhao says that in short, if he wants to live, he should continue teaching the beasts to read and write, and Feng and Qin agree with his words. Meanwhile, Qin asks Yuziyu why he let them stay there, and he replies that they needed those people, and it was important human knowledge for beasts. Yuziyu says that this knowledge could certainly come in handy when they fight, and Qin replies that the humans were doing something big, which leaves him confused. A few hours later, Yuziyu wonders if the humans were using nuclear weapons, and Qin tells her that 3 were launched, only 1 hit and the other 2 bounced off. Yuziyu asks what she meant by being bounced, and apparently he used the pressure of sound to change the trajectory of the nuclear warhead, and Qin says that even after being hit by 1, he still managed to retreat to the bottom of the ocean. It seemed that he understood the terror of humanity, but unlike the sea beast, he had nowhere to run. Qin asked if the sea creature would survive, and he replied that the most terrifying thing about nuclear weapons was not the explosion itself, but the radiation. But now, during the great age of evolution, if the sea creatures developed resistance to radiation, that would be a big problem for humanity. Yuziyu told Qin that they now needed powerful allies and needed to hurry to build a kingdom underground so that they could become even stronger and also protect themselves from the future threats lurking ever closer to humanity and the mutant monsters themselves. Eventually, the red fox Hong finally reached level 9, and the monsters began battling each other to find out who was the strongest. The red fox was powerful enough to cause damage and attack that created smoke screens that not even Yuziyu could see through. Even with the battle raging, the protagonist realized that the 2 monsters were recognizing each other's strength well, and now the Elder Emperor Crocodile, a monster of 9th level rank. Its innate abilities were atavism, which awakens the beast's instincts. The angrier it gets, the stronger it becomes. And there was also the special ability of the splendid sense of smell, where the sense of smell was precise enough to detect thousands of species of animal. In addition, he had bone armor, a layer of bones that covers the body, offering high protection. There was also the sonic shock that used sounds to break everything and created sound waves to attack his opponents. As the population increased in the Bayou Gorge, food became a problem to be reckoned with. Fortunately, with the arrival of humans, food became easier to preserve. A few days later, Yuziyu found some puppies somewhere and took them to Feng, telling him to take care of them, which was a fatal blow to his black heart. And the Huans also did well in some areas. In just a few days, the bison and the red fox managed to start communicating with Yuziyu too. When it came to learning, Pingtu and the golden monkey were certainly the most stubborn of all, and couldn't sit still for even 5 minutes. On the other hand, the white tiger studied a lot, but still didn't make much progress. The most active of the humans was Zhao, who not only hunted everywhere, but also made new clothes for Qin and Feng. Zhao even made a breakthrough in his abilities after drinking drinking from the spirit pool, which made Yuziyu think he was a really funny person. Hong told Yuziyu that it looked like he was coming to meet Yuziyu, which surprised him, but apparently the bison had been sent to stop Zhao from approaching. The bison told Zhao to stop because he shouldn't be there, and he replied that he had something to say to the great sacred tree and asked it to let him pass. Yuziyu told the bison to be careful and not to hurt Zhao, but to let him pass because he would like to hear what he had to say. Zhao begins to give long life to the sacred tree and that his admiration for Yuziyu was as great as a river, which leaves the protagonist confused and wondering if that was all he wanted to say, but he says he'll give him a minute to get to the point and say exactly what he wants. Zhao then says that he would like to join Yuziyu's army and that he would like to be able to receive Yuziyu's training. In that world, it's the strongest against the weakest, but even after awakening his physical talent, he still lacked experience. And now he was his last hope of becoming stronger. Yuziyu was surprised to see that he seemed to want to betray his own kind like that and send him away, which made Zhao nervous and replied that he had wasted a lot of Yuziyu's time and was leaving just as he wanted. Qing asks if Yuziyu really didn't intend to recruit him, and the protagonist replies that it would be good to leave him alive because he wanted them to stay there in the spiritual place more than anything else. Their strength has increased a lot compared to when they first arrived, where Feng and Zhao reached level 7 and Qing level 6. Qing says that this should be a good thing because those humans would be convenient for joining human society in the future. Yuziyu says that some people were rebellious by nature. If you gave them too many things, then they would become spoiled. And suddenly, when you stop giving them things, they would be the first to betray you. Many humans were like that, and regardless of whether the group they had called to stay with them was like that or not, they would have to be on their guard. Now that the canyon was well structured and working with metals, they just needed to be discreet. Qing says that the silver centipede he mentioned earlier had been captured and was now being exhibited for human experiments, which left Yuziyu impressed that they had caught it in just 1 month. The protagonist asks her if she was really sure because the spirits of the second order were not to be trifled with and she would end up being swallowed, and she confirms that she was sure about it. Yuziyu was surprised that Qing had learned to think about his own problems, and it seemed that his human side had grown a lot. Ever since Yuziyu the Crocodile Emperor, he had always tried his best to control his mood, and until the one they thought was the most powerful of them all started to get bored. In fierce battles, Pingta's strength reached the peak of the 7th level. The golden monkey and the wild boar also reached the 7th level, one after the other, while the birds, except for the white heron which was at the 7th level, managed to get all 8 falcons to the 8th level. The wind wolf found 30 wild wolves and set up a pack, and the growth of the exotic animals was never stable. Yuziyu couldn't leave them trapped there, and Qing says that if the Crocodile Emperor is released, he would surely become the ruler of somewhere. It was time to start something new and big. Zhao is impressed by the large number of mutant monsters there and realizes that if they were all put into the real world, the government would go crazy. Yuziyu says that they have all reached the peak of their potential there, but he couldn't protect them forever. He says that they should all leave and train, but not everyone could leave, only those who had risen in level could leave. Yuziyu says that the red fox, the ox demon, and the crocodile could leave, which makes the white tiger complain. Yuziyu says that he was still a bit dumb and so he should stay, without causing them any trouble. He says that the red fox would be called the Nine-Tail from now on and would be the boss there, while the bison would be the second and would be called the demon bull, and the white tiger would be the third in that same order. Yuziyu says that the emperor crocodile, despite being stronger than the demonic bull and the white tiger, arrived late, so he was fourth on the list. The protagonist announces that from now on they will be active as his 9 monsters and tells them to get out of there to explore other places they want, as long as they aren't human cities. The bison said it didn't want to leave, and Yuziyu said that if it didn't want to go, then it could stay there, because even if they were strong, they still wouldn't be able to defeat everyone at once, and they should know exactly what he meant. So the protagonist says that they can all leave, and they do. At the same time, Qing meets the silver centipede. She realizes that for the experiment, her body was separated from her head, and she didn't know that she was still alive during this process. The extraordinary second level vitality was incredibly tenacious, so she hoped that they could understand and that it was better to make it their power than to leave it there as part of the experiments so that they could live together. After the mutant beasts that Yuziyu had sent out had stabilized outside the territory, the days continued to pass slowly, and as usual he also took it upon himself to blame Pingtu for wasting his time doing nothing while everyone else was working hard to do something in the meantime. Meanwhile, the protagonist was working on his powers and realized that he was still too weak to make holes in roots, but was good enough for close combat despite expending a lot of energy in the process. Yuziyu decided to upgrade the Willow Blade with 2,000 evolution points and continued testing his abilities to find out how much more powerful he was becoming with each step he took. And so he tries again to use his new skills to put them into practice, causing much more damage than before. Yuziyu thought it was really interesting because its power, quantity, and range had improved a lot after the evolution, but it still consumed too much energy. The conditions of use and drawing on his own spirit power to visualize it being different from the roots. Yuziyu opened the system again and realized that all the skills, except the root, were at the second level, and the main root was the source and could improve even more than now. But to his complete shock, he would need to spend 100,000 evolution points to be able to improve his main root, which seemed like pure theft, but at least he could expand the mist to the second level with 6,000 points, which was a lot less than the previous one. In parallel, the battle against the sea monsters and humanity was raging to the point where several cannons and shots were being fired at the same time in an attempt to save humanity from destruction. The missiles continued to explode at the monsters, but oddly enough no significant damage was being done to the monsters. They wondered if the reinforcements from the Freedom Federation had arrived yet, and it looked as if they weren't coming to the rescue of those people, and it looked as if they were all going to die. A second-level transcendent giant coral crab also appeared during the battle, causing several attacks on people, and soon the city, home to so many people, was being completely decimated. At the same time, Ching had told Yuziyu to send the falcon to the designated place to meet her the next day because she wanted to deliver something to him. To Ching's surprise, when the hawk arrived to meet her, he acted quite intimately and also made enough noise to make her worry in case anyone noticed the commotion they were making during their conversation. Anyway, she hands the hawk something and tells him to take it to Yuziyu carefully. Yuziyu receives what Ching sent her and realizes that it was an item that had a kind of button on it. The system detects faint signs of life and realizes that it was a creature that was about to die at any moment. This was a mutant ant with a life expectancy of 2 days, with some innate abilities. One of them was the power to shake the heavens, which was 100 times more powerful than that of ordinary ants. He also had the special ability of sharp scales that covered a layer of golden scale armor and has not yet been awakened, and he also had the ability to get 6 sharp legs like scythes, also not yet awakened. Ching suddenly appears and asks why her master hadn't waited for her, and Yuziyu is surprised and replies that he was just spying a bit on what she had brought him. Ching tells her that this ant was a miracle created after the sacrifice of hundreds of millions of other ants, and if it hadn't been for the fact that it was only a few days old, the teacher wouldn't have given it to her so that she could do the final dissection. Yuziyu is surprised and realizes that it really must be something special, and decides that he could start by awakening his innate abilities to the first level. The ant also had scales and sharp legs, and Yuziyu realizes that if it hadn't been for the experiments, it wouldn't have had those flashy abilities, certainly being a blessing in disguise. Yuziyu says that Ching really outdid himself this time and didn't need to worry about him because the ant wasn't going to die today. The life essence was so powerful that giving it to an ant could cause it to explode, so he decided to dilute it in water from the spirit pool before immersing the ant in it. The system recognized her vital aptitude increasing, her vital signs being stabilized, and Ching was happy that the essence was actually working. Yuziyu uses more of the essence of life and an explosion suddenly occurs, causing the mutant ant to level up and take on a new form, without yet awakening its special abilities. Yuziyu uses his roots to test the ant and is surprised because its speed was incredible and almost frightening to see, and Ching adds that its strength wasn't bad either, and it had also grown a lot with the life essence. The ant knelt down and thanked Yuziyu for not abandoning him and that she was willing to follow him until the last days of his life. Yuziyu was impressed by the fact that the ant could use telepathy. It seemed that it had learned telepathy as early as level 5, while the white tiger was at level 9 and still hadn't managed to learn this skill. The ant was also very rude and even put the tiger in its place, without being friendly to anyone other than its master, which made the tiger run away whimpering after being called ridiculous. Yuziyu says that before the ant, there were 4 other beasts, and so she would be under his command as his 5th beast. Afterwards, she could go to the underground cave to train and get stronger, and he also said that he would give her a new name. Thinking she was pretty fast, Yuziyu names her Flash. Ching says that she has witnessed the deaths of countless companions in human laboratories and that after undergoing various experiments, her heart was filled with wounds. She feared that the stronger Flash became, the harder it would be for her to suppress her hatred of humans. The protagonist replied that at least that wouldn't make her oppose him and that it was enough for now. Meanwhile, the tiger was still crying in some corner and receiving Ching's consolation that it would be alright because where he came from, the more intelligent a person was, the longer they took to speak. Elsewhere, the crocodile realized that it was evolving again, and still in a place like that, and realized that this could cause problems. The scene cuts to the spiritual monitoring office where a powerful red alert begins to sound from a large power fluctuation, and it was of a spiritual power that reached 24 points. It was identified that it was a mutant beast with an entry level of 9, and so they decided to send the coordinates to the Air Forces, giving them guaranteed permission to be able to obliterate the beast at that location. direction. At this moment, Yuziyu was still playing with the mist beasts and his new creations, and the humans like Chin and the others always ran away so as not to get involved in the mess. So the humans ran and soon came across the crocodile, but the cameras began to have problems continuing the transmission and they couldn't see what was happening there. They realized that this mutant beast was bigger than the silver centipede and capturing it with the jets alone was completely impossible. The boss tells them to inform the Air Force to move in and annihilate it directly and to fire long-range missiles at the same time so as not to let it get out alive. Chin came running to tell him what was going on and how the crocodile's location had been discovered and that dozens of fighter planes had been called in to attack him. They even sent extraordinary troops to the Crocodile Emperor's position, which left Yuziyu shocked and wondering how he was discovered because he shouldn't have been so careless. Chin replies that he was discovered during his evolution and at this time they had raised his danger level to the highest level. The protagonist thought he was an ancient mutant monster and the Federation was a mess, which left him wondering if humans were really that scared of ancient gene beasts. There wasn't that much commotion to capture the silver centipede and he wonders if there was some secret he wasn't aware of that caused such a mass reaction. Chin said she had to go now because she was on standby and Yuziyu told her to be careful too. Yuziyu thinks that the Crocodile Emperor hasn't yet seen Chin's appearance and that they could possibly end up fighting and he hopes that things won't get worse because of something like this. Yuziyu decides to enlist the help of the Peregrine Falcon, which was the first beast he tamed, the ruler of the skies. He says to help him bring back the Crocodile Emperor and with his speed it should be difficult for humans to pose any threat. He tells them to hold off the planes following the crocodile and shoot them down if necessary. So the battle against the crocodile continues and several shots continue to be fired in its direction. The reports from the humans continue and right now the Air Force was taking the giant crocodile away from that place because they would also be waiting there so that they could intercept it in the battle somehow. They were all determined to fight to the death and Chin was visibly nervous. Meanwhile, at the psychic monitoring station, people were wondering if it was really necessary to fight the crocodile at this point because when they took it to the red restricted area to fight the extraordinary troop, it might be better if they only acted at the end and not now by shooting it like this. The boss replied that this was impossible because just now the Biology Institute has ensured that the giant crocodile has retro-ancient genes and could certainly become even more powerful if they don't stop it right now. A month ago, the Nation of Liberty was destroyed by eels and there was also Japan's ancient giant crab, which managed to destroy an entire city. That's why if they let the crocodile go now, they'd have to face an even more powerful creature later. Of course, the crocodile doesn't just stand by and take the blows, it also strikes back, causing the rocks thrown by the crocodile to collide with the missile, causing too much smoke for them to see. And even more rocks continue to be thrown at the helicopters, causing even more destruction and making people shout to be careful of the rocks the monster was throwing at them. They realized that this crocodile was completely different from the centipede and at least no rock had hit one of their helicopters, but it was still shocking for humanity that the animal had acquired this consciousness. They realized that the crocodile was moving away from the battlefield and asked headquarters what they should do, and they were told to use the bombs even if it stopped moving and to keep attacking without stopping. So, they keep attacking the crocodile until they realize that it has finally stopped and its muscles have started to stiffen and it is getting exhausted after the battle. They all decided to shoot to the maximum using all the ammunition available. All the shots began to fall on him like rain, bombarding the crocodile completely. People watched the scene while holding their breath, waiting for the imminent victory of the operation to kill the crocodile, and it soon began to bleed from all the attack it kept receiving. Reports came in of how Units 2, 4, and 7 were running out of ammunition, as well as Unit 8, and that they would be firing the last bomb. The humans had hoped to put an end to everything as quickly as possible, but they were suddenly surprised to realize that other creatures had begun to approach the area. They noticed that there were 8 of them and the highest spiritual power among them was 9,000 and the lowest was 8,000, and the chief asked what kind of creatures they were approaching. They still couldn't answer because they were too fast to be detected and they couldn't even capture the images in time to catch the monsters. The base reports to the people in the helicopter that they have targets approaching from the southwest and they are air targets at a frightening speed of 4.6 Mach, and it doesn't take long for the base to lose contact with all air units with the arrival of the Hawks on the battlefield. The boss is stunned to realize that the target has been lost even after all her efforts and the battle plan has failed completely. Chin sighs in relief and suddenly one of the people comments to their commander that they have managed to capture an image, and by transmitting it on the screen, they recognize that the monsters were nothing more than Peregrine Falcon. They realized that it was a predator from the top of the food chain even before its evolution, being able to fly at an incredible speed of 390 kilometers per hour, being birds that were now at their 9th level, and the current Air Force was not good enough to defeat them. The scene cuts to the crocodile after being saved by the hawk, and Ping too and the other beasts rush to check on the crocodile, worried about its state of life. Yuziyu says that everything is fine now, even though the emperor had received so many injuries. The humans caught him while he was evolving and he almost died under enemy fire, something that makes Flash furious to hear. Suddenly, Yuziyu fires an attack with his root behind the crocodile, and he comments that he has just destroyed a miniature Drono that they had left in his body. Yuziyu realizes that they use piercing projectiles, and in the next battle they wouldn't be able to use their bodies to fight because they were clearly thinking several steps ahead in order to get as much information as possible about the monsters. Yuziyu realized that there were holes all over the crocodile's body, and that human ammunition could cause extraordinary damage to a transcendent of the First Order. He didn't know how the Red Fox, Hong, was doing now, but this piercing missile wasn't really a big threat to Yuziyu. But they have missiles that make muscles go rigid and that could leave you incapacitated, and knowing this from the crocodile makes Yuziyu realize that solidified muscles really were a natural kill for crocodiles. The crocodile also gives Yuziyu a present, which was apparently a snake's egg, but unfortunately he couldn't do anything with it, so he wanted to give it to Yuziyu as a present. The crocodile tells him that the mother of that egg had awakened the powers of the ice element, and, if he wasn't mistaken, that egg had also awakened this same element, and he also got an ice spirit grass that he found next to the egg. Yuziyu was shocked at how many things the crocodile had hidden inside his mouth just so he could give them to his master. But at least Yuziyu was happy because he now had a destiny with the snakes, and as that snake egg was frigid and cold, he could also feel the strong spiritual power emanating from within it, and it seemed that it was something capable of surpassing the existence of even the tomahawk snake. In parallel, the people of humanity still continued to see things through the few images and wondered what was going on because the mist had suddenly become a vortex, and wondered if other elements had started to come to life too. Suddenly, they see the silhouette of a tree and its movements. The commandant says that they need to check again for any signs of life there, as the mountain where the crocodile escaped to had to be investigated by the Air Force and could be a habitat for mutant beasts. She says they should categorize that mountain as a red forbidden area and send troops to monitor the area, and no matter what, that giant crocodile should be shot down anyway. They were determined never to let the crocodile leave the mountain in any way, especially with the chance of other dangerous monsters like it being on the mountain that they were going to investigate very soon. Our story continues with Flash noticing humans appearing in the forest and becoming visibly furious at their presence. Meanwhile, Yuziyu tells the crocodile to go to the center of the Misty Mountains and claim the land as his own in order to create a lake. When the time comes, Yuziyu would give the crocodile some life essence to help it create a spiritual lake, and it agrees to his orders. The other animals were worried about what would happen to the crocodile, who was still injured, but he replied that he was fine and they would all be able to play when he got better again later. Ching asks Yuziyu what they should do now that everyone knew there was a giant crocodile in the mountains, and he replies that it was only a matter of time. Yuziyu says that the humans have just discovered the existence of the crocodile emperor and they could leave them alone for the time being, and then they could use the mist beast to hide the truth because on this mountain no human could hurt them. Ching says that the humans had gathered a small team at the foot of the mountain and were all preparing to be able to enter the mountain at any moment, and the protagonist agrees that he noticed this a long time ago and wonders what they should do now, but he had also considered this thought of knowing what to do. At the same time, the soldiers were together when suddenly one of them started to walk away, prompting his companion to ask him where he was going and to come back right away, but the man kept walking. The others organized themselves so that they could compact the camp right away, but suddenly the men began to be killed. They shout that an enemy attack is taking place and everyone goes on alert until they are all shocked to realize that what is attacking them is nothing less than a super strange dragon made of mist. They start firing rapidly at the mist beast from the report they had marked earlier, but soon realize that their attacks have had no result. They argue among themselves that the mist contains water, so it always regenerates quickly, and the bullets were all useless. Another soldier told everyone to get out of the way because he was going to use his flamethrower against the mist, but this same man was quickly killed by another man who appeared in the middle of the mess. The man who killed him was none other than Zhao, who had been ordered by Yuziyu to join them, because if he really wanted to join Yuziyu and the others, he had to prove his loyalty by being useful. The soldiers were surprised because there were also enemies appearing from behind, and they were even more surprised because the one attacking them was a human, so they shouldn't let their guard down because it was an enemy nonetheless. Meanwhile, Flash was also watching everything and wondered why humans, no matter where they went, always gave off that same stench of rotten meat. The soldiers are even more shocked when Flash appears in the middle of the chaos and starts firing non-stop, thus starting a major battle. Ching observes everything and realizes that considering the threat that the mountain supposes it would end up being exposed to the world like that. Yuzu replied that it was impossible to hide forever, and all they had to do now was show the humans the true horror of the mountains. Delaying the entry of humans into the mountains was their duty now, and if nothing is done, they will continue to invade the mountains without being properly punished for it. Ching asks what they should do about the soldier who was tormented by visions at the beginning and got lost in the forest, and Yuzu replies that he could let him go because he needed someone to help him bring the terror of the mist beast out into the open and for humanity to be aware of these events. Ching says that the next time they appear, it won't be such a small army and there should be more powerful armies and superhuman forces approaching the mountain. Yuzu then replied that they should go to war, and if he couldn't hide, he wouldn't see them again. A mountain full of mist all year round, a mountain that keeps people walking in circles. Soon, the rumors about these facts and that it was dangerous to enter the misty mountains spread to the surrounding towns, and now not only giant crocodiles had appeared, but there were also live mist beasts scampering around. And at the bottom of the mountain, the giant crocodile made an even bigger spiritual lake. 10 drops of life essence were given to the crocodile, and it now became a paradise for all mutant monsters. Meanwhile, Yuzu continued to evolve too, with 2 of his branches having reached the 3rd level. His strength and speed had increased significantly, and now Yuzu could also split a branch into several in order to catch his target. Strengthening his branches to the 2nd level and spending almost 50,000 evolution points to do so, Yuzu realized that it was an unbelievable amount to spend, seeming much more than a root. Even the trunk cost 100,000 evolution points, and he wondered how long it would take to evolve. But the protagonist decided to accept the costs and was left with only 823 evolution points, making Yuzu feel that his current spiritual power was more or less 490,000 and his strength was above the 2nd level. But he wasn't satisfied because he needed to speed up his next evolution. In the past, Yuzu had been able to take his time and remain calm throughout this period, but now this was no longer possible or necessary. Yuzu communicated with the Crocodile Emperor and asked him if he had found anything in the river and that he should tell him everything he had discovered. The crocodile tells him that the Great River was treacherous and unpredictable, even as strong as it used to be, but he didn't dare stay there much longer. The water of the Great River also had the power to suppress fluctuations in spiritual power, but the crocodile could still sense that there were existences that transcended the 2nd order and above. Meanwhile, in City Z, the soldier who had passed through the illusions was begging not to die and was frightened even of other human beings even after being put up for study. The commander said that the only useful information was the mist beast the fog was made of, but there was no other clue about the situation. The man replied that they should gather the army of superhuman troops, as well as the 10 extraordinary heroes of the Federation, because this battle was coming under his personal command. The crocodile was one of the 3 most powerful mutant beasts ever discovered by mankind, and even if it were to burn to ashes, it intended to burn the entire mountain. Meanwhile, the Crocodile Emperor continues to report things to Yuzu, saying that he didn't go deeper, but felt a terrible sense of oppression. He suspected that there were more than just 2nd order transcendence in the depth, and there was even a 3rd order transcendental existence. This great river was not as simple as a dragon's home or a tiger's den, which made the Crocodile Emperor interested in Yuzu's wishes, and he confirmed that he would like to bring that river into his territory somehow. The advantage of letting it flow directly into the sea would make their means of fighting humans in the future, and so they could be on the verge of rising even higher. The crocodile replied that if that were the case, he could send the badger, the boar, and the 2nd and 5th brothers to conquer the great mountains first. He was at the 1st level of transcendence, and if he moved, the humans would pick up on his spiritual strength. It would be better to use that place to train these mutants so that they could protect them from the edge, which left Yuzu impressed because he hadn't expected the crocodile to be so thoughtful. Yuzu replied that he would leave him in charge of the hunt now that he knew exactly what he wanted. The crocodile replies that the prey would be left to be beheaded by Yuzu personally, and if he finds someone with good skills, he should bring it back, and Yuzu agrees that this is exactly what he should do. Yuzu says that before he leaves, he should take some life essence, and he doesn't want anything bad to happen. Yuzu thought that now that the arrangements for this case had been prepared, it was time to focus on the city, so he asked Zhao how the construction of the city was proceeding. He replied that there were 3 floors and each opening would connect the entire underground tunnel, and thanks to the wind wolves, everything was going well. Apart from the mutated rats that had been sent, the cave was expanding faster than ever. According to Yuzu's order, a water source was brought in and a high bridge was erected that would lead to all the rooms. The number of rooms and training grounds should have increased as much as possible. On top of that, the spirit stones could also act as a source of light, not only illuminating the underworld but also nourishing the flowers and plants. Yuziyu says that Zhao has prepared everything even better than he expected, and asks back if he could ask his friend to help. Yuziyu remains silent before saying that this was the place where they lived, and as the others hadn't sworn their loyalty to him yet, they couldn't trust them completely. Zhao asked if they weren't willing to show loyalty, Yuziyu intended to kill them, and Yuziyu replied that even if he wanted to kill him, the others wouldn't agree to it. He was at war with the human race, and everything would depend on whether they wanted to stay or go. Yuziyu says that he hoped for the sake of his companions that he wouldn't sell the information he knew about them to humanity. Suddenly, a voice from outside asked Yuziyu to return to the surface because the snake egg was ready to hatch, which surprised him. Yuziyu told Zhao to continue with his work because he had other things to do and was leaving now. Returning to where the snake egg was, Yuziyu is impressed by the bright light coming from the egg, and Qing says that they should prepare to receive it at any moment. Thus, the entry-level 1 mutant white snake was born. It had the ice element talent that could control cold air and freeze anything. Its skills were icy breath, which could turn the cold air in the body into exhalation, and body protection, where the cold air enveloped the whole body, and wherever one went, it would make everything cold according to the air emitted. Yuziyu and Qing were very pleased with the birth of the ice snake and said that it really did look like something great to see, just like real snow, and also had great abilities to show off. While Yuziyu was happy, on the other side of the mountain, other things were happening. In the expeditionary unit, the mutant scent had arrived at the place in question, which was nothing more than the mountains ready for conquest. The crocodile says that all the forces around there should be eliminated, and so they should capture them alive and bring them back to Yuziyu. Flash says he'll leave and go first, and the bull agrees that he can go and shouldn't provoke any strong opponent unnecessarily. Flash and the others set off to conquer that territory, and Flash and the other mutants were all working just as Yuziyu wanted. Among the monsters there was also the transcendent chameleon of the First Order. Meanwhile, the other mutants were killing other living creatures and acquiring more evolution points for themselves, and Yuziyu received all those notifications of when his mutants were sharing their evolution points with him. Over the next few days, they hunted many animals, and Yuziyu had to admit that it was all very efficient. Yuziyu told the mutants to wait a while to eat and regain their strength. Meanwhile, not far from them, a mutant gorilla was on the scene, and Qing found it, realizing that it really was a majestic monster to behold. She also realized that it had an extraordinary display of strength, being able to move large stones, but even so, none of that would be so easy to use to defeat it, and she was prepared to continue fighting as well. Yuziyu realized that they had finally cleared the pile of bodies just as Qing returned with the gorilla for him, bringing exactly what he wanted. Qing asked if Yuziyu really wanted to train this gorilla because primates weren't like other creatures, and if he wasn't careful, it could easily get out of control. Although Yuziyu didn't answer, and this made Qing a little frustrated, it was all because he had just cleaned the grass, and again it was soiled by the gorilla, but it was okay because he could take care of it again. Yuziyu replied that he understood Qing's concerns, because gorillas were a species that was very close to humans, and it was also a very social creature. If they were guided by humans, they could evolve at an unimaginable speed. If they acquire human knowledge, gorillas will become a totally different species. Yuziyu says that perhaps the rise of the gorillas wouldn't be so bad, not least because the world was in complete chaos and it would take a long time for the species to evolve. The gorilla wakes up and faces Yuziyu with a roar, and Yuziyu realizes that it looked much bigger than the white tiger. He then paralyzes the gorilla using neurotoxin paralysis. The paralysis came from a toxin produced in Yuziyu's branches. For the beasts at the initial levels, it was like a nightmare. The protagonist says that he would give the gorilla two choices: surrender or die right now. The gorilla replied that it would surrender, and Yuziyu was shocked because he had thought of several threats to make to it until it surrendered, but apparently it was quite determined to survive. Yuziyu asked him if he had a name, but as he couldn't answer, Yuziyu decided to call him King Kong. And even though he wasn't much smaller than the real King Kong, he could still evolve a lot in the future, and said that he had a gift for Kong. Using the essence of life, he acquired terrifying muscles and even looked like he could kill someone with just a slap. Kong became a level 8 mutant gorilla with frenetic talent, able to choose to abandon his sanity and increase his strength and speed to an almost berserker state. He had a brute force ability that exceeded that of other creatures of the same level, endowed with a deadly power and creativity beyond that of other mutant beasts. Yuziyu thought that his abilities were good, but not good enough to be one of the 9 beasts. Yuziyu tells Kong to call out to his people because he needs them, so he lets out a great roar to call out to his people just as Yuziyu ordered, which leaves Yuziyu and Qing almost deaf with the loud loud noise. Thus, several monkeys and gorillas rushed out to where Kong was, and Yuziyu said that it looked like they had really won the lottery this time with that army of monkeys. Meanwhile, Flash, now ranked 6, was fulfilling his role by facing a level 7 blue praying mantis. Flash thought that even though he was 6th level, he could still fight creatures 2 levels higher, but that 7th level praying mantis was giving him a hard time this time, and it really looked like he was powerful. The praying mantis lunges at Flash, prompting him to praise it for its strength and say that it should accompany him to his side. Flash successfully takes down the praying mantis and tells it that there was no need to worry because it wasn't going to die, as it had only put Yuziyu's paralysis toxin on its blade to be able to take it down. The bull came running to see if Flash was alright and if the praying mantis had hurt him, and Flash replied that he was fast and had the power to control the wind element, but he was still fine. The bull said that the sun was rising and that the day's hunt was over, so they returned to where the crocodile was, who stared at Flash and the bull intensely. Flash asks the reason for this look, and the bull replies that if they encountered a powerful enemy, he could come out of the mountains and support them immediately. But what got Flash interested was knowing where the tiger had gone, and he receives the answer that the tiger ran off with the blue mantis. The bull says that the tiger probably wanted to take credit for capturing the mantis, which bothers him because this shouldn't be a behavior that Sheen would have taught him. At the same time, Yuziyu had been practicing all day and was exhausted, having used up all of his 450,000 points of spiritual energy, but he still had 27 gains to improve, a few more hunts and they would all be ready. Now, his level 3 branches had 23 branches, and his level 2 branches had 27 branches, leaving only 781 evolution points to use. Suddenly, the tiger comes running and Yuziyu asks him why he's so excited and asks if the first day of hunting is over. Suddenly, the tiger spits out the blue praying mantis and Yuziyu asks what exactly it was. Analyzing it, he realizes that this was a level 8 blue praying mantis with the wind power talent, so it could collect wind, which as well as increasing its strength, could also wrap around its body and increase its speed. In addition, it had the ability to mimic, where it could camouflage itself and hide its smell, making itself indistinguishable from the real object. Yuziyu realizes that he had the power of wind and mimicry, which seemed to make him very good for an assassin, and praises the tiger for bringing a useful guy to the team. Yuziyu puts the praying mantis to rest in the spirit pool to recover until it can wake up, and to his surprise it starts to run away quickly, so Yuziyu quickly catches up with it and pulls it back into the spirit pool. At that moment, the bull also returns and tells Yuziyu that the nine-tailed one hasn't returned yet, and that's why he was getting really worried and would like to go out to find him. Yuziyu understands that the nine-tail had been away for about half a month, but as he was quite powerful, he shouldn't have been in danger or anything like that, so there was no need for the bull to worry because he was really powerful. The bull insisted that Yuziyu let him find him, and Yuziyu denied his request, because it wasn't because he was strong that automatically meant he would find him like this. It would be difficult to find him in the desert like this, and if he ended up meeting an opponent of the same level as him, he might not even have the confidence to defeat him. Yuziyu says that if the bull advances to the next level, he could at least give him permission to go, and the bull understands his master's words and says that he would like to go to the Spirit Stone mines so that he can train, and Yuziyu agrees. Yuziyu thinks that the bull had been at his side, absorbing the spiritual power he was emitting, and after a long time had managed to reach level 9, and now, after he would like to leave to enter the spiritual mines, where the soil was optimal for the bull's properties. In this case, it was clear that the bull could reach the transcendental level, and this made Yuziyu curious to know how powerful it could become. So 3 days passed, and during those days, all of Yuziyu's branches were improved with the help of the white tiger and Flash. Now, his 3rd level branches had 50 branches, and after that, Yuziyu learned that if the branches were infused with spiritual power, they would split into more branches. He decided that he could try to do this by putting his spiritual power into all the branches and see what would happen. Yuziyu begins injecting the spiritual power, which ends up leading everyone on the mountain shocked to see what was happening in the sky, which looked very similar to an aurora borealis coming from Yuziyu's roots. Sheen says that it was a beautiful sight, and it was also clear that it had a terrifying force. Fong says that if the branches fell, that place would certainly be flattened by the pressure and force. Flash tells the two of them that it was an honor for humans like them to be able to witness Yuziyu in action, and if Yuziyu didn't consider them to be useful people, Flash would have killed them. Fong gets angry and Sheen tells Fong to wait a bit before provoking him. Sheen asks if Flash hated humans that much, and Flash almost laughs at her word, clearly stating that he abhorred humans, which terrifies Sheen. Meanwhile, Yuziyu felt that the rate of consumption of spiritual power was terrible, and and in a few moments, another 400,000 points of spiritual energy had been used up. He felt that the third level skill was too heavy to be used at the second level of transcendence, and at the moment, Yuziu could only use the skill in life and death situations. Meanwhile, underground, Zhao was in the basement when Yuziu started talking to him, saying that he had done a good job and that he was worried that he might not end up being able to control them properly. Zhao was surprised and replied that the gorillas and monkeys were primates after all, and he could control them as long as they recognized him as stronger. Yuziu tells Zhao to give them army training and turn them into a military unit. Suddenly, Zhao is shocked when an earthquake starts to happen, and Yuziu replies that it wasn't an earthquake but the advance of Qing, and realizes that it must be the evolution of the bull taking place. He thinks that as the spiritual power was blocked by the stones, he couldn't perceive some things very well, but if there hadn't been a light emitted the last time Qing evolved, surely not even Yuziu would have noticed the difference or understood that change in the earth. Yuziu noticed that the light was coming from inside a hole and realized that it was precisely where the spirit stones were being kept. The protagonist is surprised by the great power that was coming from the bull and wonders how powerful it could become in the future. Yuziu realizes that after the earth absorbed a large amount of spirit stones, some flowers began to grow on Yuziu, and they were very beneficial to the demonic bull. Yuziu gets excited because he can't wait for the moment when he's going to advance to the next level, and suddenly a huge explosion happens that causes a mess and destruction in the hole to mine the stones. Yuziu was shocked by the great explosion of power when it seemed that the bull had gone up a level, and wondered why all the advances had been ruined for him. After all, the same thing had happened to Qing, and now it was happening to the demonic bull too. It was then that the bull appeared evolved, and Yuziu was impressed because its pair of horns was even more majestic, and judging by its aura, it was remarkable that it was on a totally different level to the white tiger. Yuziu also realized that the air around the bull was distorting, so he checked the system for the attribute of the demonic bull. Yuziu realizes that it was a gravity field, and with his powers over the earth, he could control the gravity around him. Yuziu is amazed that he was able to awaken such an ability. After all, gravity was the most powerful force in the world. Ping-Tu shows up to see the bull, impressed that it has become even stronger. The bull said that even though he had become stronger, he still couldn't feel its power, and Yuziu replied that it would be easy to do so, as he would feel it during a fight. Yuziu sets the bull up to face Flash and the praying mantis, and if it can win, he lets it go, otherwise the praying mantis has to stay there and be obedient. Even with the advances of the praying mantis and Flash, the bull takes them down with its power of gravity quickly and without any hesitation. Yuziu realizes that their speed is useless against the bull, and even tells Ping-Tu not to try to leave discreetly because he'll end up dying, which makes Ping-Tu freeze in fear. The bull asks if Flash is alright, and he replies that it was no big deal, but his organs were crushed and he ended up dislocating joints in his arms and leg, but even though he says he's fine, he coughs a little, clearly hurt. Yuziu uses his life essence to heal Flash and the praying mantis. The Rain of Vitality was another function of life essence, and it was able to speed up the recovery of living beings and awaken the vitality of their bodies. Yuziu thinks that Flash looked fine on the surface, but his internal organs had been torn apart by the force of gravity, and it was very fortunate that he had a shower of vitality, otherwise he would have had to rest for months. Finally, after recovering from their injuries, Yuziu told the bull that he had just reached the transcendental level, but he still needed to get used to it, and in the future he would be 10 times stronger than he was now. Yuziu says that he promised to let him look for Hong, the nine-tailed fox, if he went up a level, so he was giving him permission to go, but says that he should be careful. If he found Hong, he should immediately return to the mountain, and the bull agrees with the orders he received from Yuziu and sets off on his mission. Meanwhile, at a soldier's base, some of them are arguing among themselves about having heard something about the possible crocodile attack and when it would happen. One of them said that this was impossible because they were 20 kilometers away from where they were before, and now the people of the Transcendental Force had also arrived, which could give them the opportunity to win this time. The soldiers were confident that when all the troops and artillery arrived, they would be able to turn the mountain into a large plain. Meanwhile, at the Transcendental Research Institute, Qing returned to Ling's body. She realized that after reaching the transcendental level, her powers had increased far more than she had thought. It was like a fusion of physical and spiritual abilities, and now she has managed to make a great improvement to her flames and her control of them. Suddenly, a girl appears telling Qing that her mentors are waiting for her, so she leaves the training ground, leaving behind all the destruction caused by her powers. The girl said that the training room was made of a metallic superalloy, which was crazy to see something like that happening to a human like Qing. Qing Ching leaves the room and meets up with her instructor, and the other extraordinary people around her are surprised to meet her for the first time in an official capacity. They were surprised because Ching had a wave of heat emitting from her body and was exploding with extremely vigorous spiritual power. But the most important thing was that even beyond being powerful, she was extremely beautiful. A man called Li Hao approaches Ching for a chat, and she replies that she's never even heard of it. The instructor laughs at Hao's frustrated face because he was confident until now, but loses all his confidence in an instant with Ching's answer. The girl tells Ching that Hao was one of the best in the Federation and had advanced to the transcendental level half a month before her. Hao was the son of a wealthy man from the Li family, and his father spent billions on spiritual herbs for him. He had recently become the youngest major general in the Federation due to his performance in the coastal invasion. Hao says that it was alright that she had never heard of him before because he had shown up so that he could invite Yu Ziyu to join the 2nd Military District, but he had to apply a test first to check that she was really qualified for this role. Hao says it was really quite simple and it was just the need to face him. Everyone cheers for Ching and tells her to destroy Hao and not to underestimate their lab ace like that, and even the instructor cheers for Ching like that. They tell Ching to be careful because Hao was using a super special thunder element and so she should be careful, but everyone keeps cheering for her even though they were telling her to win. Hao tells Ching to watch out because he would be coming at her with all his might, so Ching uses a fire butterfly, which makes Hao think it makes sense because she was a girl and could even turn the most violent flame of all into the most delicate thing possible. Ching warns him to be careful, which makes Hao furious and jumps on her, complaining that it should be a joke because it was just a simple butterfly. Hao says that his spiritual power was close to 20,000 and she had no chance, but Hao catches fire just as Ching's butterfly touches him, causing him to fall backwards screaming. He complains that it was too hot and that he was being burned alive, but the instructor keeps cheering Ching on until he kills him, even though he hears that this is surely a crime. The others continue to cheer either for Hao to defeat Ching or for Ching herself to take him out and prove her strength openly. Hao wonders what was going on because it was only a fire butterfly, but it was still lethal at that point, and Ching laughs saying that she had warned him before to be very careful from the start. Hao is furious and tells her not to think of herself because she was provoking him to the point of looking like she wanted to die like that. He says that if she ended up dying, she couldn't blame him. Ching laughs, replying that this was impossible, creating several fire butterflies and saying that it was too late for him to admit defeat, and if Hao ended up dying, he shouldn't blame her either. The two of them collide their attacks in a huge explosion, and everyone watches the scene shocked by the power of both of them. Hao spits blood and kneels on the ground before falling, admitting defeat and making the other people celebrate that Ching has won. The people in Hao's squad are shocked because it was a scene almost impossible to imagine, and among the people watching, one of them had a camera and was transmitting everything to a superior. The superior realized that Hao was losing the battle badly, and another man replied that Ching's skills were terrifying. Hao was a formidable opponent for several people, but Ching still managed to defeat him with some ease. The superior says that they should complete the report on Ching and mark it, along with all the information about her, as confidential information. He says that after the implementation of the Second Army, most of the recruits in the 2nd Division were no longer as powerful as Hao, which makes him wonder where they could find truly powerful transcendentalists. The scene cut to the Bayou Gorge and the Misty Mountains, where Yu Ziyu's beasts were still helping him to increase his level. The roars of countless beasts could be heard in the distance, and meanwhile, Yu Ziyu's body absorbed spiritual power and began to strengthen. The spiritual power was close to 450,000 points, but Yu Ziyu was still waiting for every root, every branch, and every leaf of his body to reach its limit, and so he could begin his advance to the 3rd stage. But what Yu Ziyu hadn't realized was that inside the cave, a red aura was pulsating with evil energy. The spirit stones absorbed this energy, so none of the creatures in the canyon could sense it except for Ching, who had the transcendent ability of intuition. Ching realized that it had been a while since she had felt an unsettling energy passing through her, but it was only a few times. She realized that it came from the cave that had been expanded a few days ago, and that there were a few waves of energy coming from inside. The second wave of energy was even more powerful than the previous one, and she wondered how it was that Yu Ziyu hadn't noticed it yet. Suddenly, something holds her, and she is taken deeper into the cave and disappears. When Yu Ziyu wakes up, he wonders where Ching is and soon senses her voice coming from somewhere. Yu Ziyu looks for Ching and is surprised to see that he hasn't been able to find her, and wonders how he didn't realize that a person had disappeared just then. Yu Ziyu thinks that the fog has been getting so thick over the last few days that he can't pay attention to everything. He wonders where it went because Ching certainly wouldn't have been able to get out of the mountains like that, so he uses his sensory fog. Finally, Yuziu finds her, and she was in the deepest part of the cave. He wonders how she got down there and ends up meeting a mutant class plant that was keeping Chin trapped down there. The plant's innate ability was to be able to create a forest of vines. Its ability was that of bloody mist, being able to corrupt enemies with its mist. In addition, it could use its thorny vines, which were parasitic vines covered in thorns, and could act as a parasite on a creature and control it. Yuziu realized that that plant was a blood-colored plant that had been found in the spirit mines in the past, but it ended up parasitizing and mutating and hiding, even being able to kidnap Chin, which meant that it had some kind of intelligence with it. Yuziu wonders if he couldn't detect the plant because of the spirit stones, and finally senses the hostile aura coming from it and wonders if it was normal for it to be so aggressive at their first meeting. Yuziu begins a battle against the plant to prove who owned those mines and successfully pulls the plant out of the ground, suddenly acquiring a new ability. This ability was called Seeds of Vitality, whereby using the spiritual power of the mutant blood plant, it would be possible to create multiple trees in the ground, thus giving rise to a new forest. Yuziu wondered if the plant was so powerful that it could create a forest and wondered if it could even create an ancient forest. Yuziu has killed many creatures in the past, but has never absorbed their abilities, and wonders if it would be necessary to hunt other mutant plants in order to gain even more abilities. Even so, Chin ended up dying after being caught by the plant, which was a real shame for Yuziu. Yuziu realized that Chin had wounds all over his body and that plant wanted to become a parasite inside Chin. He decided that he would give her a proper funeral considering that they were acquaintances, but just as suddenly Chin's body began to react and awaken in a new form, leaving Yuziu impressed because it seemed that she had made a kind of symbiosis with the mutant blood plant. But she began to feel pain in her head and wondered if she was still human, and Yuziu replied that she was no longer human but was in a kind of vegetative state. Chin is annoyed, but Yuziu replies that he didn't know which side of the story she would like to be on, but she certainly couldn't return to human society with that new appearance, and she certainly wouldn't be treated like a human anymore. Yuziu realizes that Chin's consciousness has not suffered any damage, and even she has become able to absorb the blood plant's energy. Then Yuziu tells Chin to join them because this place could be her new home, and she replies that she would like to join them. Meanwhile, the mutant chameleon ended up defeating the tiger and he was taken back to Yuziu. Yuziu asks if he really loses to a rank 1 monster and still lets it get away, and Flash replies that the crocodile emperor wanted to attack, but he refused his help and tried to go it alone. The tiger was too proud and wanted to defeat his opponent alone, so Yuziu uses his life essence on him while Flash realizes that there were even more trees than before in the place where Yuziu's main body was. Yuziu tells them that he was testing his newest ability and could now create trees, and once the spiritual energy inside them had dissipated, they would be ordinary trees. While they were talking, Flash sensed a strange aura and went off on Chin, and Flash was surprised before asking what exactly had happened to her. Now she was someone with the life force talent to control blood-colored vines to attack and defend. Yuziu tells Flash that Chin was now their new companion and was in the 6th rank, now named Thorn. Flash replies that he was opposed to this because humans could stay there and work but could never ally with them. He says he would kill her now to prove that weak humans were unworthy of joining them, and Yuziu threatens Flash not to defy his orders or anything he decides. Flash kneels down and says he's wrong. Yuziu says that he knew he hated humans, but Chin was different and he should therefore make an effort to get to know her a little better, and who knows, maybe he could change his mindset a little in the future. Flash agrees with Yuziu's orders. Yuziu thought that it seemed that the hatred he felt towards humans was even greater than he had imagined, and if the two of them didn't get along, it would be really difficult to deal with that team. In parallel, the extraordinary ones were hiking and reaching the deepest parts of the mountains, but they still weren't able to find any clues to the Emperor Crocodile. They wondered who could be behind this Emperor Crocodile, but others replied that as long as there was payment involved, they didn't need to worry about it. They didn't even have to face the crocodile, just find it, and that's what mercenaries like them did for the money, and further information wasn't important at all now. One of them said that he had heard that the mist on the mountain was marked as a red zone and there were said to be mist creatures there, and they were curious to know if it was true, so the mercenary leader told them to keep looking because they might be closer to the target. Mercenaries, a new profession that emerged, had powerful talents that gave human societies the chance to evolve even further than before. Mercenaries relied on their combat skills, performed services, and were paid handsomely. A few hours later, they run into none other than Chin. Chin says she didn't know there was so much good fruit around and was going to get more for Zhao and Feng as they hadn't eaten for some time. A mercenary approaches her and says that he won the lottery because he really didn't think he'd meet a mutant like this, and he slams her head into the tree. The mercenary says he had no idea they could find a reward like that while they were looking for the crocodile emperor, and another mercenary is disgusted by his companion's actions. After all, he was going to reduce the price of the mutant by hurting her face like that, and that kind of mutant was extremely rare to find. What's more, she had a beauty that was hard to find. One of them suggests that they could play with the mutant for a while before selling her. After all, there wouldn't be any major problems if she only damaged her body a little, and the others agree that it was a good idea because it had been a while since they had had any fun. The female mercenary intervened, telling everyone to calm down because they couldn't get so worked up just because they found a woman who wasn't a cheap slut for them to use. Despite this, the mercenary gets angry when she sees that Cheen does have a beautiful body and says that she would like to gouge out her eyes and mutilate her body forever. Cheen begs them to stop and not to do anything to her, and she attacks the first mercenary in front of her. The female mercenary is surprised because Cheen's aura was powerful, but also very unstable. They realize that she must have mutated recently and still couldn't control her strength, which meant that they could defeat her if they could unite. The mercenaries rush at Cheen, but before they can reach her, Flash appears and kills another of the mercenaries by beheading him, enraged that they dared to invade the forest. The mercenaries are shocked because the monster could speak and they recognize him as a golden ant, and it looked like he was protecting Cheen. The mercenaries say that the mission never said anything about confronting the monsters, and so one of them starts to run away, but he is quickly decapitated too, shocking the remaining woman. Flash asks where they came from and the threat too, and how they could dare to set foot in the UZU territory. Flash says that all of them couldn't think for a moment that they would come out of that mountain alive after having entered, and so he also kills the mercenary woman. Flash fires at the last mercenary and, ignoring his shot, runs through him and kills him with another blow, leaving their bodies lying on the ground. Cheen is surprised to see Flash, but suddenly the last mercenary that Flash failed to kill at once uses a bomb to blow himself up, and Flash ends up getting caught in the explosion. He realizes that he was careless, and soon the mercenary woman appears, saying that it really hurts to be hurt like that. After all, that explosive grenade was specially created to deal with monsters like Flash, and she prepares to kill him with a stab as well. But Cheen intervenes and kills the woman with his vines to save Flash's life. When it was all over, Cheen was crying for a long time, making Flash angry that she kept making that noise. Cheen says that it was still the first time she had killed someone and she felt terrible about it. The truth was that she had only followed Fong to get spirit herbs and earn money, but now not only was her body like this, but she had also killed someone. Flash says that humans like her only realize the value of life when they killed each other. He says that he used to be just like any other ant, but now he was a beast who survived the endless torture and constant destruction of human experiments. Flash says that if Cheen had been captured by them, her fate would have been much worse than his. Besides, Cheen only killed to save her life and therefore shouldn't feel guilty, which only made Cheen continue crying even more and thanking him for his words. Flash asks her how she could keep crying like that again, and she replies that it was because just a few days ago, he himself had said that he was going to kill her. Flash tells her to forget it, and she replies that she's never heard words like that before, and Flash comments that she wasn't even thinking about her own family and asks if she missed them. Cheen says that she was actually an orphan and didn't have a family, so Flash says that now she had one with them. Meanwhile, Yuziu realizes that she didn't even have to do anything, and Cheen's heart was opened by the very person who wanted to kill her until a few days ago. Later, Cheen tells Fong about her desire to stay there, and says that Fong should also think about the plans for his future now. Fong asked what she meant by that because he was different from her, and still had a family waiting for him at home in human society. At the beginning of the spiritual recovery, the inland cities were attacked daily by the beasts, and the death rate kept rising, but the cities on the coasts were the worst. The world received a frenzied attack from the sea beasts, and the death toll reached hundreds of thousands. Humans refer to this time as the Great Age of Darkness. At the same time, the leader of China's Federation says that the Spiritual Research Institute has come to a conclusion about the global attack by sea beasts and asked them to explain the situation properly. The director of the Inland Spiritual Power Office replies that until now, according to the investigations, the concentration of spiritual power in the depths of the ocean was increasing rapidly. She shows on the screen the increase in spiritual power recorded over the last 6 months. Spiritual power was like oxygen. Pure oxygen was extremely toxic, and spiritual power behaved in exactly the same way. If a creature couldn't withstand a large amount of spiritual power, it would die of poisoning. For this reason, the giant ocean beast beasts were forced to emerge into the shallows. And since the shallow water beasts couldn't compete with the deep water beasts, they migrated to the coastal lands. The director says that if this continues, the sea creatures will inevitably attack. The general of the China Federation, Zhao Jianjun, asks how long this frenzy could last, and she replies that it was only the beginning. They also detected signs of spiritual energy rising inland. The spiritual tide was coming in again, and the continent's beasts would suffer a second mutation. The coastal cities would be attacked by sea creatures, and the inland cities by wild animals. The inland area was completely different from the coastal areas, with heavy budgets like nuclear weapons that could not be used. That's why they concluded that the battle on land would be even more terrifying than the ones at sea. The Federation leader said he had something he wanted to show everyone, and the scene cut back to Yuziyu. Meanwhile, he was exploring underground. His roots were 10,000 meters deep, and he felt extremely uneasy, as if the world was facing a catastrophe. Qing asked where Yuziyu was taking her, and he replied that they were very close now. Qing noticed that the ground was emitting a strong light, and so they soon reached what was known as the spiritual tide. Qing says that it really was a lot of spiritual energy, and Yuziyu replies that now a new cycle of evolution was about to begin. In parallel, the humans detect the recordings of Flash's battle against the mercenaries and defending Qing. The humans are shocked that a monster could speak, and especially that the woman being defended was a mixture of a plant or a kind of mutated human. The leader of the Federation says that these were images that were transmitted by the device in the eye of one of the mercenaries, and this was just one of them, and they should certainly have heard the word master that Flash had shouted during the battle. Apart from the peregrine falcon that suddenly appeared during the crocodile hunt, he believed that there was someone controlling everything behind the curtains, including the mist beasts. At the same time, Yuziyu obtained a spirituality shield and realized that this was what was interfering with his mist ability, which he certainly hadn't expected because human technology was really very advanced. He thinks that if this continues, he won't be able to detect life forms with his mist, which is a big problem. Yuziyu asks if humans were there, and Flash confirms that there were 5 in total. The crocodile reports that he has bad news because several strange birds have started to appear, and Yuziyu knew that the birds in question were actually planes and helicopters with a large army of soldiers for the battle. From there came the Transcendental Force from the Genetic Modification Department, as well as the Federal Transcendental Force from the Transcendental Academy. Flash and the other mutant monsters were angry that the humans were daring to return to those mountains, and the tiger roared angrily. The humans looked up at the mountain and realized that it was a truly spectacular sight. Yuziyu thought that the humans were acting more quickly than she had expected and wondered why Qing hadn't said anything and if something had happened to her in the meantime. With an army like that, it didn't look like they were all just after the Crocodile Emperor, and it seemed that other plans were at work for that particular operation. 5 days ago, the leader of the Chinese Federation ordered everyone to find out who was in control of Cloud Mountain. They wondered if there really were humans who could tame beasts, and the principal replied that she herself must have heard that the ant was speaking the human language, and that was certainly something she couldn't learn on her own. June says that they could even be a dangerous organization, and it might not even be just one individual behind it all. There were 6 red zones inside, and the Bayou Gorge was the most dangerous zone at the moment. The second spiritual tide would be coming in just 10 days, and June said they had to annihilate them all before they could evolve again. Suddenly, someone entered the meeting, and he said that he was there to report on the battle plan for the Gorge, as they would be attacking in 5 days before they could recover their spiritual power. At the same time, the research instructor was successfully synthesizing the mutant elixir, and now Qing's flames could become even more powerful, so he decided to give the elixir to her right away. But Lang was furious that everyone was only focusing on Qing again, and it seemed that the instructor might let everyone die there except for Qing, considering how much they loved her for her powers. In parallel, the people at the meeting with the leader of the Chinese Federation were discussing whether they were really serious about using those things, and if they won, it would all be for nothing, as they were sending too many troops to face the creatures in the forest. If they lost, there would be worse consequences, and all the beasts in the gorge would be out of control after the spiritual tide. June says that in addition, all the battle plans were confidential for all the positions below the majors. The commanding man says that finally, he would like one person in particular to be included in his battle plan, and if the beast that created the snow was a mutated human, then they would need to face it with someone of the same caliber of power, and that person was none other than General Li. After the meeting, the cities of the Federation built walls for protection, and regardless of whether they were useful or not, at least they would stop weaker beasts. In City Z, Qing ran through the corridors to reach the hospital room where the instructor instructor and researcher had been put to bed by Ling's hands, and she was shocked to see the scene with her own eyes. Our story continues with a flashback to when Ling attacked the instructor out of jealousy that they were only focusing on Qing and took the elixir for herself, thus gaining great new power. The instructor says that the elixir was made from the inner crystal of a fire leopard, and she herself had no affinity with fire and her body will start to mutate, and tells her to spit out the elixir she just drank. But Ling attacks the instructor and tells him to shut up, and so we return to the present, where they tell us that after Ling fainted, she was taken into custody by the military's genetic unit. Ling was not given the death penalty for attacking the instructor, as she was under the influence of drugs when she injured him. Ling was imprisoned and would soon be sent to the battlefield, but in the end the instructor, the doctor, soon realized that he was still alive and that Ling's fireball had only taken half of his body because he had tried to protect Qing from Ling. The doctor hands Qing the piece of elixir that was left over, and Qing says that he shouldn't try so hard. The doctor says that Qing was still young and had a big bright future ahead of her, so she should blame no one for her death and not ruin her future just for that. But Qing was still filled with fury after seeing that the doctor had gone through all this just to be able to keep the elixir he had prepared for her, and after Qing agreed to the instructor's request, he said he was relieved that he could now rest without worries, and so he passed away right in front of everyone, leaving them shocked at his death. Meanwhile, Qing was containing a great rage against Ling, leaving the hospital with a clear determination after all this. Meanwhile, another man appeared to talk to Qing and said that the headquarters of the Second Army were demanding that she go to the new combat location immediately, as the first group of transcendentalists had just arrived and she would be leading with the second group, and asked her to follow him. Qing asked where the battlefield would be, and he replied that he couldn't tell her because the details would be explained later. And so begins Qing's journey to get involved in the great battle that will take place at Bayou Gorge and to soon face Ling and get his revenge. But in order for this battle to take place, you need to be subscribed to this channel to receive all the notifications of the manhua's summary videos. So let's get on with the story. Meanwhile, Qing begins to leave for the battlefield and is surprised that it would take place right on Bayou Mountain, and the supreme commander of the operation is there, and Qing recognizes him as the person behind it all. The commander said that this would be the humans' first offensive against the beasts of the interior, and the aim was to deal with the beasts of mist and the giant crocodile of the Bayou Gorge, as well as to eradicate the powerful beasts that reside in the four mountains. Their aim would be to kill enemies they had never seen before. The commander said that the strength of their opponents was beyond imagination and that the battle would be incredibly brutal. Their main opponent was a mutant beast that could bring down military jets with ease, and this time 30,000 soldiers would be sent for the operation, so they would have to outnumber their enemies. That said, there would certainly be many casualties in that operation, but they were all still determined to win because only then could humanity survive and enjoy those lands freely. The commander told her that the code name for the operation would be the Hunt, and so all the soldiers shouted that they agreed with his orders. Qing thought that this was not good and needed to return and alert her master as soon as possible, and that's when a man approached telling Qing that General Li wanted to talk to her. Qing goes to the operations department and asks what happened to be called, and Li says that he ended up reading her CV and found out that her hometown was very close to the Bayou Gorge. He says that Qing and her sister Ling were attacked by mutant beasts in the Misty Mountain, and although she survived, the other sister wasn't so lucky, but even so she should be very familiar with the path that would lead to the center of the Misty Mountain and imagines that she would enjoy having revenge for her dead sister. Qing replies that she doesn't remember very well what happened before the attack, which makes Li curious, and she asks if he just wants to talk about it. Until the scene cuts and Qing finishes reporting things to Yuziyu and how General Li wanted to recruit Qing as his disciple, and she accepted his request. Yuziyu thinks that the abilities of Ling's body were really incredible, and so it was natural that other people would want to have her as a disciple, and perhaps it was even good that she had connections with such an important person. Qing said that the army would attack the mountain the next day and asked if he thought they could really win, and Yuziyu remained silent before replying that for any problem, there would always be a solution. No one wished for death there and everyone wished for life, but not all wishes could come true. Yuziyu says that if he could, he would like to remain quiet and neutral for now, but now that has become impossible, so he announces to everyone that they would have a brutal battle to face in the future. In fact, it would be a truly brutal war, and if they lost that war, everyone would die, and even if they were to emerge victorious, they would lose many companions in the process, but the sacrifice of those who were gone, those who survived would no longer be threatened by human beings. Yuziyu said that everyone should be ready to fight to the death for the good of humanity, and that the next day's battle would be extremely extremely important for this purpose and would determine the entire future. Thus, everyone in Yuzu's army shouted in agreement, and now they were all ready to face the humans and their advances at any cost. At the same time, Feng was thinking that the army had finally found this place and thought they could take advantage of the chaos to be able to escape with their small treasures to avoid death itself. At the same time, Qing returned to the human side and realized that he had an even larger number of troops than he had first imagined, and soon a soldier approached to say that the combat team had been divided into 3 groups and the other 2 also had a lot of people gathered. The officers wanted to prevent any mutant animal from escaping reality, and that's why they placed all those troops around the 4 mountains. There were 50,000 people in total, which left the soldiers themselves in shock because it was an unnecessarily exaggerated situation and seemed like great madness for what was about to happen over the next few days. But the other soldier replies that in fact all this was totally necessary because before he became a transcendental, he tells us that he saw with his own eyes in the zoo that a level 4 mutant antelope wiped out an army rescue unit of almost 100 men single-handedly. It was only a 4th level beast and yet it managed to cause such a huge amount of damage, not to mention that it was for the monsters they would encounter inside the canyon, and they were all level 4 beasts that were nothing more than food. They had to crush them with their numbers because only then could they minimize the casualties, which makes Qing keep silent. She thinks that with that many troops in 3 different places, she wonders if Yuzu could really beat that many monsters. The commander told her that the operation would be divided into 3 groups, and the central troops would be the main attackers, while the troops on the left and right would attack from the flank. The bombardment of the tanks would open the way, and then the transcendental forces would act as the main attackers to surround and suppress the enemies. The commander says that all the soldiers must be equipped with spiritual protection devices because they could camouflage the spiritual power and smell of the body, and so they would also be useful so that they wouldn't be detected by the beast. He says that they will have 24 hours, and so they start the great battle, and so they start the war with all the forces from the center, left and right. One of the soldiers asks if this bombardment wouldn't cause a fire, and another replies that they had several firefighters ready around the mountains for that. The bombs were not only placed to clear the way, but also to gather several beasts in one place. General Li tells them to stop thinking about it and concentrate on the main mission they were sent to do, and the men agree. They are impressed because Li was also on the battlefield and also because he was as tall as an impenetrable wall, and it was certainly the pose that one of the strongest generals of the generation would have. Li was a one-man army, the most powerful transcendental of them all. The soldiers wonder if he managed to jump over that wall, until suddenly they realize that the way to the mountains has finally been opened, and everyone begins to mobilize to prepare and move forward. And so all the soldiers begin to move forward, and just who begins to mobilize to face the soldiers is none other than Yuzu himself with his roots and the beasts of mist, something the humans were prepared to face from the start. Qing notices that his master has started to move and immediately passes on the information to the commander that the front line has intercepted the enemy. Many mist beasts appeared on the left flank to confront the soldiers, and meanwhile on the right flank an unidentified creature was attacking the people on that side, and there were also creatures that seemed to be made of trees by their composition. The commander was impressed by the sight he was seeing, and in parallel Yuzu said that invading his territory wouldn't be that easy for them. The commander tells them to tell him how many mist beasts and how many trees they are attacking and to give air support to the flanks, and also tells the anti-aircraft artillery to get ready to start with the incendiary bombs. They fire the attacks and all the bombs and shots, but soon it is reported that the anti-aircraft artillery has been blocked, and suddenly the army of gorillas and monkeys start attacking the humans as well, and this is reported to the commander. The soldiers keep firing their bullets and bombs, and the gorillas throw stones at the tanks to blow each one up, causing a big mess in the human army. Yuzu thought that this was exactly how it should be, and that this was the way to stop an entire army. Suddenly, the crocodile emperor approaches and tells him that there were some rats that had managed to enter the territory, and Yuzu replies that it was alright because there was someone else who was going to take care of these invaders, and that someone was none other than Ping Tu, who was ready to kill all the invading humans without hesitation. Meanwhile, the commander was discussing events within the war zone with the other men. They had 50,000 troops, 100 tanks, and 75 helicopters. The Transcendental Force had 1,000 soldiers, and the genetically modified force had 2,000. They also had the most powerful soldiers in the Chinese Federation, so they passed on all the information to General Li. The commander said that finding the Crocodile Emperor wasn't the main mission, as they had mobilized all their forces to investigate the organization behind it all. To avoid the attacks of the Mist Beast, they had placed the army army further away, but now the mist beasts were fighting at the forefront. They didn't know how they had done it, but the leader of the mutant monsters was very powerful indeed. Surely it must have been a leading monster with first-class transcendental strength or above, but there were still 23 hours and 41 minutes until the real fight took place, and they still had until the last second to solve all the mysteries inside that mountain. Meanwhile, in the army of the Great Tree, on the left flank, the soldiers were still shooting at the mutants, and Sheen didn't even hesitate to take them all down with her blood vines. One of them called her a witch as he fired, only to be killed immediately afterward by the tiger. Sheen told him not to duck yet because there were many other enemies ahead beside them. Suddenly, a bird rushed out to warn Sheen of the danger of a powerful missile coming to blow up the land. On the other side, those from the Transcendental Genetics Department, such as Lion and Yen Ling, were amused to think that just one blow would be enough to finish them off. The two soon realized that Sheen must have been the woman who was the mutant mentioned in the mission, and Lion said that the bombardment from before was designed to be effective against mutant beasts, and he didn't expect him to survive after that big explosion with the missile. Even so, the tiger and the others had resisted, and Ling said that if they captured Sheen, they could find out who their leader was, so she said she would take care of the white tiger while the other would look after the woman, and this would be a real battle between monarchs. Meanwhile, Ping-Tu and the other smaller mutants also continued to fight the soldiers without any hesitation, knocking them down even as shots tried to hit them. Others weren't so lucky and were hit hard, like the golden monkey, who was hit with a slash of the most lethal scorpion venom there is, and would surely die after only a minute of having it in his body. The extraordinary ones continued to fight the mutants like Ping-Tu and the other minor mutant monsters. Those were level 7 and 8 transcendentals like the Thunderbolt and the Hammer Girl, as well as the venomous scorpion. The scorpion asked if it was the badger that had attacked Yan Gaoyuan earlier, while the poisoned golden monkey, Ping-Tu, and the armored boar were ready to take on the three of them even if they were wounded. The three of them go at them, saying that they only had 2 to get rid of because the monkey was poisoned, and then Ping-Tu attacks first, which make them laugh because he had the courage to attack first even though he was so small. Ping-Tu fires a thunder shock at the extraordinary ones, leaving them all shocked and wondering how exactly he managed to use such an attack. But not only does Ping-Tu fire a powerful shock attack, the others also attack the extraordinary ones, ready to take each of them down. Locusts were like arthropods with green or yellow bodies with a brownish tinge, and there were more than 10,000 species scattered around the world. Locusts were not harmful to humans and posed no serious threat, and that was only when they were alone. When a cloud of locusts attacked a human, no matter who that person was, under the swarm of those tiny insects, they would feel unimaginable despair. At the same time, the battle against the extraordinary ended badly for the humans. Extreme absorption was an innate ability of apes and gave them the ability to absorb all beneficial substances from other organisms. But when a toxin entered their body, extreme absorption would strongly reject the toxic substance, and this rejection was a physically painful process. The soldiers shout to find the beasts because they should have been responsible for bewildering those extraordinary transcendental forces. They fire even more shots shouting not to let him get away, and Ping-Tu receives the bullets and sends them away as a result of their effort. They realize that this was indeed a high-level beast, and so they should use the special bullets, and even though Ping-Tu tries to protect his companions, it doesn't take long for another extraordinary to appear behind them, ready to attack and kill them all at once. The extraordinary tries to kill the yellow monkey once and for all, but the wild boar steps in to defend him from the attack, which makes the monkey and Ping-Tu cry at the sight of the wild boar's sacrifice. The extraordinary Ping-Tu knocks the boar down with his bare hands, leaving the monkey in despair at the sight of its fallen body. Distracted, Ping-Tu also receives an attack in return from the extraordinary and flies off. The soldiers shout that ordinary bullets are useless against mutants and they should only use the special bullets to run and catch them, and soon the golden monkey is running at them with blood in his eyes to avenge his companion who was killed before his eyes. Ping-Tu picks up the golden monkey and quickly runs away with it, and the soldiers shout at him not to let them get away and continue chasing him, but Ping-Tu's paw was badly bruised after being shot earlier and he has a hard time getting away. Meanwhile, Flash continues to attack the soldiers in a cruel and cold way, and the praying mantis even tells him to wait a while because if he kept running like that, he would soon be exhausted. But Flash was determined to exterminate all the humans on the mountain, and meanwhile even the white tiger and Sheen were getting tired of enduring all those attacks together after so long. Lion says that the mutants have really gone mad out of nowhere, and Lang says that they've killed 100 of their men after all. But Lion adds that the mutants couldn't have put up with everything for that long and they only needed one wolf to get rid of them all. They notice that the tiger tiger continues to protect Qin throughout the fight and that they could use it as bait to kill them all at once. Qin thinks that the tiger won't be able to withstand the coming attacks for much longer and that it is already powerless to resist, as the bombings have done a lot of damage to it. If it hadn't been for the white tiger, it would have been captured a long time ago. The extraordinary ones realized that they were really in for a challenging fight and were having trouble hitting and taking down the tiger. Lion is surprised when the vampire Gullah appears and finally reaches the battlefield. Qin wonders how much longer the battle will last when he sees that the enemy has got even more reinforcements. After all, Gullah seems to have a lot of spiritual power and only Yuziyu can face him directly without too much difficulty. Gullah told everyone to keep moving forward because they would end up losing sooner or later, but this time all the transcendentalists were going to attack the mutants at once so that they could take them down without exception. They wanted to determine the moment and find out if they could even stop their advances, so the mutants continue the battle as before to take down the humans. They fire a light grenade at Qin, and at the right moment, Ling pierces her in order to kill her once and for all with his attack to get rid of her once and for all. Meanwhile, the planes continue to drop bombs and missiles on the guerrillas one after the other, wondering if this could really stop the mutants' advances once and for all. But Yuziyu continues to defend his army, and the soldiers are forced to keep firing non-stop, as are the hawks who keep attacking the helicopters from the sky. Yuziyu wonders how they dared to use missiles of this caliber against him, but finally a human had managed to get to where his main body was, and that human was none other than General Li. At the same time, Qin was hit hard by Ling's attack, who was furious because Qin had the same smell as Qin that made her want to vomit and made her furious. But it wasn't long before the white tiger knocked Ling away with one blow too, leaving Lion worried about whether she had survived the attack. Ling realizes she's in a tricky situation after the cut she received on her neck, and the white tiger tells Qin to run and find Yuziyu. Qin is impressed that the white tiger was able to speak, and the white tiger goes on to say that there were still many powerful troops behind, and if she didn't run away soon, they would all die soon. Qin tries to resist the tiger's pleas, and it insists that she go, so Qin ends up running away from the battlefield. The extraordinary ones chase Qin, telling her not to even think about escaping in any way, but the wolves quickly run up to them and knock them down before they can reach Qin. The soldiers realize that Qin was escaping as well and shot at her, and soon the birds also step forward to defend her from the gunfire. The mutants began to be terribly wounded one after the other, and Qin knew that they were all practically sacrifices so that she could survive, and she apologized to all of them for this having to happen. She couldn't help any of them, and only managed to keep running away. In truth, the heron didn't want to go into that battle. In the white egret's mind, there wasn't even a glimmer of an emotional connection with those girls. She didn't want to die, and she didn't understand why they would shed tears for creatures that had already been killed. For the heron, this behavior had no meaning. Nevertheless, the white egret went to the battlefield, even though it was a battle she could never win. Herons were large land birds, and they lived in groups. They usually formed flocks made up of several families. They were an endangered species, but with spiritual energy, they had almost overcome this difficulty. After the incident with the previous snake, she sought protection from Yuziyu. Although she wasn't highly regarded and only lived on the outskirts, she was still happy to have a home. As she interacted with the others, she gradually understood their determination to get revenge, and the more she understood, the more she felt helpless. The heron felt ashamed that she wasn't strong enough, which is why she made a very important decision. When there was another crisis, she would never allow humans to pass through or let her territory be taken over like that. The heron was willing to sacrifice herself alongside her companions, just like the white tiger, in order to save the lives of others. But there were still a huge number of soldiers available to kill them, and the extraordinary ones realized that the mutants were at their limit to continue the battle for so long. It was at this moment that the white tiger remembered the words he had heard from Yuziyu in the past. Yuziyu had told him that it was good that he was seeking great power, and in terms of skill he would never lose, but he needed to understand that the power of the flesh wouldn't last forever. After all, the power of the body would dissipate as time passed. When that happened, the tiger would feel devoured, and then it would have to mature its mind. Yuziyu told him to have the courage to never back down, even in the face of the most powerful enemies, and to have the character to bear his own responsibilities. After all, these would be the values he would need to remember in the future, for he was the true king of the beasts. When exactly did the attribute of a king begin to emerge? Was it when he separated from his mother? Or when they get their first hunt? Or was it when they faced their own death for the first time, but still showed unwavering courage? No, actually it wasn't at any of those moments. In fact, it was another time. In parallel, we see the white tiger standing above a pile of human corpses in front of Flash and the the praying mantis. The praying mantis realizes that even though the white tiger was on the verge of death, it was still able to maintain such a proud posture. He starts to cry when he realizes that the skin on the right side of the white tiger's body has been completely ripped off, and even Flash had tears in his eyes when he saw the courage and power emanating from the white tiger. Flash wondered when the humans would stop stealing what was precious to them, filled with hatred as he realized that even more of his companions were dying before his eyes, and how much longer they would maintain their hatred towards them. At the same time, Ping-Tu and the others were hiding, and they heard the voice of the soldiers saying that they should be somewhere over there, and they shouldn't let them escape. The golden monkey was totally injured after the poison, and so Ping-Tu decided to run out to be used as bait, and the extraordinary ones realized that this was the badger that had defeated their previous team. It was a beast that they knew couldn't be killed with armor-piercing ammunition, so they had to kill it. The humans are frustrated when they realize that Ping-Tu has gone into hiding, and he soon appears so that he can kill the humans, so the humans quickly start attacking the badger as soon as he appears in front of the others. But to the humans' surprise, Ping-Tu hides underground, thus escaping their reach again, but he soon appears again to continue attacking the soldiers one after the other. One of the extraordinary ones asks where the golden monkey was and hits Ping-Tu with another powerful blow, but not receiving enough attack, he continues to receive several punches in succession. The human was annoyed that the mutants were insisting on bothering him, but even after receiving so many blows at once, he still didn't die. One of the women told them to stop wasting time and kill him once and for all, because there were still several other mutant beasts to kill. Ping-Tu thought he wanted to order another snack for Ling and Qing. After all, the food was delicious back then. Just when Ping-Tu was attacked by the humans, he let off a few bombs from inside his mouth, leaving the extraordinary ones shocked because he decided to blow himself up alongside them in sacrifice. Then Ping-Tu wakes up in a white place and meets the dead Ling, which makes him cry and run into her arms in tears for finally being able to see her again. Ling told him that everything would be alright now and that no one would ever hurt him again, so they could move on together now. In the end, the golden monkey only saw the body that remained of Ping-Tu after his great sacrifice, but there was still a human who had survived the explosion despite feeling great pain and begging for help. The human was the one who had beaten Ping-Tu to death, and he was angry that the badger had caused all this, and he was so angry that he could beat him alive to death, and even after he was dead he could still get in his way. It was then that the golden monkey hit the man in a rage after seeing the death of his friend. The man realized what was happening and said that he hadn't killed Ping-Tu and that he was wrong, and promised that he would leave the forest, begging for his own life. But the golden monkey is still furious and doesn't forgive the man one bit, beating him to death. The golden monkey then walks away carrying Ping-Tu's body, even though he's all wounded, remembering the good times when they were still at peace and playing and fighting together. And in the end, the golden monkey just decides to stay by the bodies of his companions to rest in peace after that dangerous war. Meanwhile, Qin was still running to meet Yuziyu, but she heard footsteps behind her and realized that it must have been the white tiger. But to her surprise, it wasn't him, but Lang, who was wearing the white tiger's fur on his clothes, and who even mocked her by saying that its fur was too hot to wear. Qin is shocked to see what has happened and furious enough to fight Lang, who mocks Qin for being too slow. Lang says that she couldn't do anything with so many wounds on her body, but before Qin ends up being killed too, Feng and Zhao show up to save her, which surprises Lang because they were two humans. She asked if they were part of that organization, and Gullah said that if they could capture the two humans, they could interrogate them all they wanted. He told Lang to stay away because she wouldn't be able to fight in that state, and said he would take care of them quietly. At the same time, Li was face to face with Yuziyu, and the general recognized that Yuziyu was the boss of all the mutant monsters there. The protagonist agreed that that was exactly what it was, and Li thought that in fact they already had prior knowledge that the creatures were intelligent, but one like this in person was still incredible. Li says that he didn't expect Yuziyu to admit it so quickly, and asks if he was the one who made the Miss Beast. At that moment, Yuziyu saw the status of General Li, who was a second-class extraordinaire. He had the innate skill of innate wisdom. In addition, he had the special skill of sword chi alchemy, where he could increase spiritual power and gave the power to kill enemies far above the user's level, but consume that person's lifespan. Yuziyu claims that he created all this and that humans shouldn't have meddled. Li replies that Yuziyu's strange beasts were taking over human territory, and if they didn't get rid of them now, they would never have peace. Yuziyu said that calling it part of their territory was really arrogant, and it didn't seem like he could solve the problems of that day with words alone, and that he would have to kill all the humans. So Li begins his battle against Yuziyu, but his sword quickly breaks into several pieces, explodes just as he slams it into Yuziyu, and he ends up being caught in a matter of seconds by Yuziyu's branches. At the same time, at the humanity base, the commander and his men discuss the most recent event of the war. They mark where the plane that got stuck in the giant crocodile was last seen, and then on the map that was the mountain in satellite view surrounded by fog. They show the original appearance of the mountains, which shocks the humans because it was a large cliff and that was possibly where they were supposed to be hiding. The commander says that they had been discussing this before and that the organization in control might be some humans themselves, but the chance of them being the creatures responsible for all this was even greater. At the time when they were gathering information, they show the moment when the plane was brought down by the beasts of the mist, and that in the bottom right hand corner there were some as yet unknown beasts appearing. After the restoration technique, the result was that they found a tree that was supposedly responsible for evolving the beast. The commander announced that it had only been half a year since the last resurrection of spiritual energy, and to be able to control 8 peregrine falcons in that short period of time and subdue a giant crocodile was something impressive. Yuziyu's strength was no less than that of a first-level transcendent, that's for sure, and to be able to manipulate all those strange beasts, evolve human beings, and speak normally were all mysteries that needed answers, and everything could be discovered when General Lee arrived at the enemy's location. What they would be facing this time was not human at all, but would be a direct confrontation against the newly awakened intelligent monster, but Lee managed to get caught in a trap by Yuziyu during the battle. Yuziyu says that Lee made an innocent claim that he would take that place, but now he was kneeling in front of him. Yuziyu says that he had no intention of starting a war against the humans, but since they were the ones who attacked first, if he ended up retreating, they would never divide the human territory. The general wonders if Yuziyu really thought he would believe this, because Yuziyu possibly hasn't even realized it yet, but all the soldiers who were coming were all equipped with spiritual power isolation devices that act on 5 meters around them. The spiritual power of Yuziyu's beasts would be turned off and they wouldn't be able to help in any way without it, and Lee says that he has just received a message saying that all the organized beasts that had been killing soldiers have been killed. It doesn't matter who it was that hurt the soldiers, whether it was the golden monkey or the tiger that fought against hundreds of humans to protect the mountain, because they were all dead, and Lee announces this directly to Yuziyu. Lee says that right now, he was an elephant and the humans were ants just causing Yuziyu minor damage so that they could survive on that island. Yuziyu replies that he knew all this because that war couldn't be won without sacrifices, but they didn't fear death. At the same time, the Falcons continued to destroy the helicopters and warplanes, and the soldiers announced that their speed was better than before, and they were getting much stronger instead of tiring as time went on. But it was all because that world belonged to everyone and they didn't intend to back down. The only thing they could do was survive by fighting even if they were hated for it, and Yuziyu's words continued to be fired at Lee, asking since when that world had belonged to them. Yuziyu mocked his words because he had started the war, but if he didn't kill him, nothing could stop him until he got his revenge for all those who had fallen. Yuziyu said that where they lived, they didn't need anyone's approval, and that this world belonged to all living beings, and human beings only knew how to say stupid things. At the same time, Flash and the Crocodile Emperor appeared in the battle with Sheen and the others, and Flash was looking for those who had killed the White Tiger, furious and wanting to kill all humans. The soldiers noticed the presence of the Golden Ant and prepare to attack him, but the Praying Mantis quickly kills them before they can fire. Gullah is surprised because he wasn't expecting another beast to be so fast and intelligent, and Ling realizes that things are about to get ugly, so he should retreat and leave. But Flash didn't intend to let anyone get away and runs after Ling before he does, crashing into Gullah, who says that Flash wasn't the only fast one there. The Praying Mantis crashes into Gullah and ends up injuring himself, realizing that even using just one move, he was still no match for that opponent, even though he was on the 7th level. At the same time, Flash also seemed to be affected by Gullah's powers, who was especially strong among those in the Extraordinary Division. Flash doesn't hesitate to go after Gullah again, but ends up receiving several blows in succession in response to his attack. Flash's speed with his blows was still enough for Gullah to dodge each of them without much difficulty, which leaves the Mantis impressed because Flash was so fast that he could barely keep up. But despite Flash's rapid attacks, Gullah defends himself against all of them and wonders if he could at least penetrate his skin using all his strength, and then hits back at Flash with an attack that almost kills him. The Praying Mantis runs towards Flash and Zhao holds Gullah from behind so that Foam can attack Gullah, because even though they can't pierce her skin, they could start by piercing her eyes and reach her intestines with an attack from top to bottom. But Gullah manages to avoid the attack again by dispersing into several bats, and Sheen shouts that that they should attack the red-eyed bat that was the real Gullah. The praying mantis was the one who rushed to attack Gullah and hit him full on, leaving him surprised because he ended up receiving one blow after another and couldn't escape at all. And the one who was waiting to make the final attack was none other than Flash, sending him to his death with his final attack. Zhao wondered if they had managed to win well when suddenly Gullah returned, firing a stone attack that hit several people around them, clearing their space and allowing them to return. Gullah knew that this move consumed too much energy, but it was better not to underestimate his opponent. He realizes that Feng was desperate because Zhao received most of the attack to defend him from Gullah, and the mantis was also on the verge of death, sacrificing the right part of its body just to be able to protect Flash. Flash had tears in his eyes again when he saw his colleague's sacrifice. At that moment, Gullah realizes that despite his thin body, his strength and speed were impeccable, and if he didn't kill him right now, he could be a real problem later. Gullah rushes to kill Flash, but Qin steps in front of him and takes the blow instead to protect him, which leaves Qin stunned again to see someone else sacrificing himself as his shield. Qin says that it was his turn to save him and falls to the ground, while Gullah says that if he reported this to the military officers, maybe that kind of war wouldn't happen in the future, but he would keep it to himself as this was the only option for him to feel the pleasure of killing. Gullah said that they wouldn't have to cry, no matter who died first, because he had changed his mind and thought of killing them all, and Qin and Zhao were just his battle appetizers. Feng attacks Gullah full of hatred and shouts to Flash that if he didn't want to die, he should take the praying mantis to escape from there, and just then several rats jump out to hold Gullah in place. Flash says that he was really despicable, and the mantis says that it's all over and that they should run away immediately and let the humans kill themselves. At that moment, we have a flashback to when Flash was still just a little golden ant watching his companions die, and how at that moment he had only accepted his own fate. That kind of pain of not knowing when he was going to die was terrible. Living as an ant meant that his fate was cheaper than paper, but now even if Flash couldn't win, he still had to keep fighting. The praying mantis holds Flash when he seems to want to keep fighting and asks how many times he expected to be told that he really had no chance of victory, and Flash replies that he knew that but didn't want to die in vain because he had to protect the place. Flash asks what the difference would be between that and dying if he just ran away now, and the praying mantis replies that if that was the case, if only he wanted to die winning, he'd tell him to eat it and use its power to get stronger. Flash is shocked and asks what exactly he was talking about, and the mantis says that since he was going to die anyway, he could tell him that. He tells him that his mother ate his father to give him the moon, and his father became her strength, so they could coexist together. It was a ridiculous way to die, and he complains that he couldn't accept suffering such a death, and if he couldn't control that death, at least he should control his own life himself. That's why he wanted to let Flash eat him, and it would be entirely his choice, and his strength would be his strength, even with everything else. Flash continued to cry and replied that he didn't want any of this because many of his friends had died, and he didn't want the praying mantis to be just another one of them, and soon they heard Gullah killing all the rats while Feng was full of hatred attacking Gullah. The praying mantis told Flash to stop being stupid and spat blood because now talking was painful enough. After all, they had come this far together. He didn't feel the presence of any other companions and they had all died, but he would rather give his power to Flash than die at the hands of a human. Mantis says that he always thought of Flash as a true friend, and now this was the fate he had chosen for himself, so he shouldn't blame himself for it. Flash continues to cry and scream in rage and frustration as Feng and the others continue to get hurt in the battle against Gullah, and he gets hurt even more trying to save the lives of the rats. Gullah asked what was the point of saving the life of a mutant rat like that because in the end they would all die the same way, until suddenly Gullah's attack was stopped by a huge explosion of power, and out of that explosion emerged Flash in his new form, surprising Gullah because his appearance had changed. He wonders what happened because until then Flash was just dying, and now he was able to use tricks like that, but not only that but his aura has also changed a lot since then. Flash was now a level 9 beginner level mutant, which didn't seem like much to Gullah, while he himself was still a level 1 transcendent and would never reach his feet. Gullah says that Flash's companion risked his life to protect his own, but he didn't even try to escape, and that hope they were holding out was just plain silly. Even if he got stronger, he could never reach his level. But Flash surprises Gullah again by proving his speed is even greater than before, and he fires an impact using his cape to hit him. But Gullah misses his blow and doesn't even realize that Flash was picking up the bodies of the rats on the ground during that time. Flash says that he always knew that Feng's heart had never been on Yuzu's side, but he had always treated the mutant rats as if they were his and his family's, and now he could return because he would fulfill his role of avenging avenging each one of them. Gullah realized that in an instant, all the bodies had been moved to the other side of the ground, which made their great speed even clearer. Gullah says that the things Flash just mentioned made it sound like he thought he could win that fight, and although he had underestimated him before, things wouldn't be the same. Gullah claims that he was going to make him regret being born, but in the same second he received a punch from Flash that sent him flying away. Flash says that he shouldn't fall, but should get up right now because he wouldn't let him die that quickly, and he would torture him as much as possible for all the death caused by his hand. Gullah wonders why his power was so strong even though he was only at the 9th level, and how he could be even faster than him, a 1st level transcendent. Gullah replies that if he wanted to torture him, he would refuse because he didn't think Flash could do anything like that. Gullah fires an attack at Flash and laughs because he was so weak, and so the two continue to exchange blows and dodge each other. Gullah said he was only a mere level 9 and it didn't matter how fast he was, because in the end he would still die at his hands. The most important thing in a battle was power, not speed, but Flash was so furious that he ignored all Gullah's taunts and returned the attack by hitting Gullah in the face with pure fury and hatred in his eyes. But he didn't back down and continued attacking in return, firing a bomb that was made of bats and was also his only technique. He could still dodge, but all his companions would be annihilated. Flash replied that all he had to do was kill all of Gullah's bats, which made Gullah laugh because there were an immeasurable number of bats and it was impossible. After all, there were more than 13,000 of them, and Gullah was ready to fire his big explosion and devastate the place. He sends his bats flying towards his opponent, and so Flash begins to kill all the bats, surprising him because not only has this happened, but they have all turned against Gullah to explode. It doesn't take long for Gullah to receive a full blast and fall with his own attack, but Flash wasn't finished yet and attacked Gullah again with another punch, sending him flying far and brutally against the ground. Gullah realized he was going to get even more than that and even told him to wait, but Flash didn't even hesitate to keep punching him over and over again without stopping. Gullah is impressed because that should be Flash's real strength, but not only that, he was absurdly fast and couldn't keep up with him. His combat power was insanely great, but that only confused him more because he was still only level 9 and he himself was a 1st level transcendent and still couldn't defeat Flash. Gullah becomes enraged and grows his body to counter Flash's attacks, but none of his attacks even reach his body because Flash deflects and returns these attacks against Gullah. But to Flash's surprise, Gullah grabs his wrist and takes the opportunity to attack him with his other arm, shouting that it was now completely over for Flash because he was a powerhouse of extraordinary power. Flash remembers Yuzu's words about how he had always felt a great hatred for humanity, but not all humans were bad, and perhaps in the future he could change his opinion of human beings, and on that day they could become true companions, and it was precisely because he remembered Yuzu's words that Flash hadn't yet died to Gullah, which left him shocked. Flash said that Gullah had massacred his companions, offended his master, and tried to destroy his home, and now his only friend had been brutally killed. This was all unforgivable, and that's why he attacked his opponent once again with pure fury and hatred in his eyes and heart, ready to kill him once and for all. After defeating Gullah, Flash realized that his body had been affected after his effort, and it seemed that his body wasn't used to receiving such pressure. After all, from the beginning, this power really didn't belong to him, but it seemed that at least he had been able to avenge his comrade, even if he had reached his limit, and even though it was too late to say so, he told all his dead comrades that it had been great to meet them all. Flash looked at all his dead friends with a smile and apologized to his master because he needed to rest for a while at the same time Ling was still desperately running through the forest for her life, and who she finds is none other than Qing in Ling's body, leaving her surprised because she hadn't expected to find her there, which was very unlucky. Ling said that there was no point in arguing now because the genetic troops and the mutant beasts were still fighting, but the vast majority of the beasts were dead, and said that all help was welcome now, but it was all to be able to guide Qing to the point where she could kill her. Qing asks if she means it and Ling agrees, walking past her saying that she was hurt and would come back now, but as she passes her Ling decides to give her a blow to kill her, only to receive another blow in return that sends her flying away. Ling asks what she was doing and if she wanted to die, and Qing agrees that she did, but it wouldn't be her who died, but Ling herself, because Qing was furious. Ling asks if she really wanted to kill her, and Qing agrees that that's exactly what it was. Ling replied that she understood that she had offended Qing before, but now was not the time for them to fight because they should be working together to eliminate the beast, and Qing replied that she couldn't and told her to shut up. But Ling insists and asks if it was all because of the doctor, and says that he had no choice because the medicine was too powerful powerful and he couldn't control himself, and when he came to, he was dead. Qing punches Ling in the face and sends her flying away, breaking her nose and causing Ling to complain that she was in great pain. Qing says she promised the doctor she wouldn't kill her, but she never said she couldn't beat her up instead, which makes Ling furious too, and she rushes at Qing. But Ling doesn't even touch Qing because she strikes back with one powerful blow after another, sending her flying away as if she were nothing more than a ridiculous insect. She uses her fire butterfly to burn Ling and continues to beat her time after time. Ling begs for her life and says that she was really wrong before, and says that if Qing would just let her go the day she could make it up to her later, but Qing couldn't care less and pierced Ling's hand with a sword of fire that made her scream in pain. Qing said he wouldn't kill her, but he wouldn't let her go unpunished. There were countless beasts on that mountain and she wouldn't be alone there, and that's when several wind wolves appeared and saw the perfect opportunity to catch Ling. She then started screaming with hatred at Qing, who was going to kill her, but the wolves jumped on her and killed Ling, devouring and destroying her body.